Chapter 743. They're keeping a close eye on him. I don't have the time. Niu Dao replied in a low voice. I just came back from Shangya. He's indeed injured, but it's not serious. I don't know how he managed to defeat 90 people by himself. Maybe he's on drugs? Drugs? Can you find any clues? I don't know either, Niu Dao said. I've only been here for less than 2 days. It's not easy to get into their circle. I can't possibly ask about everything, right? Bastard, is this how you talk to your seniors? Another voice scolded. Soon, the voice that was on the phone became amiable. Don't blame Oningmakan. After all, this kind of thing can be stressful. Niu Dao, don't worry. It's a great achievement to be able to catch any clues from Huaiji's group. In the short term, you should be able to get to Huaiji's side as soon as possible. You should be fine, right? Yes, I understand. I won't let down the Iron King faction's reputation, Niu Dao said solemnly, nodding and bowing. After hanging up the phone, the smile on his face gradually disappeared. He had worked so hard for the faction for so many years. In the end, he was thrown out as a spy just because he was a bastard. F***CK. The higher-ups didn't treat him as a human. Why don't I just take some money and run away? But soon, he dispelled this idea. If he dared to betray the Iron King faction, he would probably be covered in cement and sunk into Jingdu Bay before he could run out of Jingdu. He had to do this even if he didn't want to. If he was exposed, he shuddered and pulled up his pants. He cursed in his heart. F***CK. Both of them are not good people. Niu Dao paused for a moment. Only then did he realize that someone was standing behind him. His short hair was white. It was Gao Zhe from Huaiji's group. Gao Zhe glanced at him suspiciously. He shuddered subconsciously and quickly bowed. Gao Zhe waved his hand and said, There's no need for that in the toilet. You're called Niu Dao, right? Niu Dao Qin? Yes, it's me. Niu Dao nodded frantically. Gao Zhe nodded nonchalantly. Oh, someone called you just now, but you weren't there. Remember to go to the leader's office. He's looking for you. Yes. Niu Dao's heart skipped a beat, but he didn't dare to delay in front of Gao Zhe, so he hurried upstairs. However, when she reached the door of her team leader's room, she didn't dare to enter. Just as she was pacing back and forth uneasily, she heard a sound coming from behind the slightly closed door. Is it Ox Island? The door is unlocked. Come in. Niu Dao swallowed his saliva and opened the door. He subconsciously heaved a sigh of relief. There were no thugs glaring at him from behind the door. There was only a simple bookshelf, a table, and 2 empty chairs. At the tea table by the door, the busy young man looked up and glanced at him. Come in, don't be nervous. Niu Dao was stunned for a long time. He looked at the ferocious and ugly face in the description. No matter how hard he thought about it, he couldn't believe that an extreme Dao cultivator could be even better looking than those male prostitutes who sold their faces. From the looks of it, he wasn't even as good at fighting as he was. Could it be that he was just a pretty boy who relied on others to curry favor with the guild leader? What would you like to drink? I just bought a bottle of good wine this morning. Do you want to try it? His team leader's voice interrupted his thoughts. He hesitated for a long time before nodding vigorously. Soon, a glass half filled with wine was stuffed into his hand. Huaishir patted his shoulder. Don't be nervous. Sit down first. Wait for me for a while. It will be done soon. Oh, okay. Niu Dao held the wine glass and sat down on the opposite side of the desk. Just as Huaishir was looking at the report from the house, he noticed that there was a huge crow standing on the clothes rack in the corner of the room. As if it was carefully taken care of by someone, the crow looked glossy and smooth. Its feathers shone with traces of metallic light. Its body was even a little exaggerated. The crow glanced at him as if it had no interest in him. Ka made a sound. Translated, it meant, Snitch Guna. The range of the bone-bearing sanctuary and the cage of dreams overlapped with the entire Huaiji group. It was equivalent to more than 1,600 crow spying in the dark all the time with their small eyes. Even the phone fraud company upstairs and the convenience store downstairs were not spared. It would be a joke to say that there was anything that could be hidden from Huaishir. Although this group of crows always stared under the skirts of the ladies in the finance department and tried to share the scene with Huaishir, giving him a headache and annoyance from this morning until now, Huaishir didn't do anything. He started to meet the members of the Huai group one by one, and then relied on the Cage of Dreams to check their favorability. Congratulations, in just a few days, more than 30 people had become Huaishir's diehard fans. Some of them were like Winnow, who had formed a deep friendship with him by committing crimes together. Some of them were old members of the Fujimoto clan, who were loyal to their boss Fujimoto clan because of the grudge Huaishir had against their boss Fujimoto clan. Some of them were simple-minded and would do whatever their boss told them to do. They would listen to whoever was their boss. And some of them were loyal to Fujimoto clan because Huaishir was strong enough. She was stronger than everyone they knew, but she was also different from those who were equally strong. No matter what the reason was, Huaishir had to consolidate everyone's relationship and wait for the future. At the same time, he tried his best to cultivate downlines in the Huai group and develop more diehard fans. He suddenly felt that this kind of thing was similar to the idol operation. In the final analysis, it was to get as many diehard fans as possible, take good care of passersby fans, and then try to get as few people who hated him as possible. This way, he could accumulate more popularity and sell more new albums and handshake coupons. Of course, more importantly, he had to deal with the anti-fans who had infiltrated the organization. For example, the informants sent by other groups, the spies in the new Luo group who were still trying to backstab him, and the traitors. He didn't expect that the Iron King faction would arrange for him after only showing his face for 2 days. After Huaishir finished signing the report, he put down the report, pinched his chin, and looked at Niu Dao in front of him. That strange smile made Niu Dao's expression gradually stiffen. He had the illusion that he had been seen through. Finally, Huaishir picked up the wine glass, took a sip, and asked, "Niu Dao Qin, this is your name, right?" "Yes, yes." Niu Dao answered loudly. "Don't be nervous. Don't be afraid. We're here today to chat." Huaishir waved his hand, smiled, and asked things like how old this little comrade was, how many people were in his family, whether he had enough necessities for the holidays, whether he needed any help from the group, and so on. The pacification seemed to be effective. Niu Dao's expression gradually relaxed, and he answered fluently, sipping the wine that Huaishir handed over. When the atmosphere was almost set and the effect of the medicine began to take effect, Huaishir said with a smile, "Speaking of which, what do you think of the Huaishir group?" "Of course." "Cough, cough. Very good, very good." Niu Dao's expression stiffened. He loosened his collar, coughed twice, and almost told the truth. "All the seniors take good care of me, and the salary and share are very good. Although the atmosphere in the group is really too stupid." "Have you really been in management before? Isn't there too much problem?" "Speaking of which, does everyone have a brain? They don't even check the new members. What if a traitor like me sneaks in? Moreover, I've only been here for 3 days, and I've already become a trusted member. Hey, can you guys be more careful?" He had a stomach full of complaints, but he couldn't spit them out. His face turned red with the influence of the alcohol, but fortunately, he managed to hold it in. "Ha ha ha. Niu Dao Kun, you really don't look like an extreme person." Huaishir sighed. Niu Dao was puzzled. He touched his dyed blonde hair, the tattoos on his body, and all kinds of messy street accessories. He didn't understand why Huaishir said that. "Ah, probably because you're shy when you smile?" Huaishir shrugged. "The other guys aren't like you, always talking about F***. When you talk to me, you'll occasionally say something that makes my liver cold." But Niu Dao Kun didn't curse from the beginning to the end. "This is very good, very good. Keep it up. Our group is also civilized people." Huaishir didn't hide his praise, which made Niu Dao feel embarrassed. After hearing his words, the first thing he felt wasn't relief, but a kind of indescribable disappointment. Although it's normal to curse as an extreme person, manliness isn't something that can be highlighted by cursing. "Niu Dao Kun, you don't have to feel ashamed." Huaishir took a sip of wine and continued, "I was just thinking that it would be good if everyone in the group could be more cultured." "Hey, Niu Dao Kun, do you have any dreams?" Niu Dao didn't understand. "That's right. Anything you want to do, dream, wish, anything is possible." Huaishir said indifferently, "Since it's just a casual chat, I'll talk about mine first. In I want to live a happy life. What kind of stupid wish is that? Isn't being the boss enough happiness? If you can earn so much money, go play with a few more women. Also, isn't this kind of childish wish only a child would have? Isn't this person abnormal? Neo Dao's mind was filled with thoughts, but when he was looked at by that pair of eyes, his mouth couldn't help but move. He felt that he must have been drunk. If you want to talk about wishes, he said in a low voice after a long time, it would be great if I could continue to go to school. He said something so stupid that even he wanted to laugh. A mixed blood from the inner circle of Donghua inner circle wants to go to school. Unexpectedly, Huaisher didn't laugh at him. Instead, he rubbed his chin and muttered, as if he was really thinking about it. Going to school, that's a little troublesome. I was just saying, it's mainly because you're too old, it's not easy to arrange. Huaisher slammed the table and became serious. Speaking of which, aren't there a lot of online courses now? Neo Dao Kuan. Do you want to learn about them? There's something wrong with this person. Neo Dao was stunned for a long time, then laughed awkwardly. I was just saying. After all, I'm already this old. But learning doesn't depend on age. Huaisher shrugged. How about this? Neo Dao Kuan. If you want to learn something, why don't you tell me? To be honest, I know a lot of teachers. Actually, there's nothing I want to learn. Neo Dao Kuan didn't want to continue this topic, but for some reason, his mouth moved again. If you're bored, it's always good to learn a little Latin, right? Aya, Xiaoqin, you learn so fast. You memorize the letters so quickly. Maybe you're a genius in learning Latin. The words in his memory came back to him again, and he was stunned. After a long time, he remembered. The teacher who said that to him was already dead, overdosed. When he was found in the garbage, he was already smelly. But since he was young, that was the first time he heard someone praise him. Some people really felt that he could do something in the future and not become a garbage. Even he himself couldn't remember it. Once again, he thought of it. Latin, he murmured softly in a daze. This, you should have said so earlier. The man behind the desk breathed a sigh of relief, as if he had encountered something worth being happy about. He slammed the table excitedly. If you want to learn, I'll teach you. Neo Daoqin looked up at him confusedly and saw his smile. It wasn't mockery nor sarcasm. He didn't even wonder why he wanted to learn Latin. Instead, he was full of expectation and excitement. It was as if he would be very happy if this guy wanted to learn Latin. Was he crazy? Neo Daoqin lowered his head, holding the cup in his hand. He suddenly didn't want to talk anymore. He wanted to find an excuse to leave, but he heard a voice from the opposite side. That person said to him, Unis pro omnibus, omnis spurino. That's it. You see, Huaisher smiled, directly turning the report on the table over, holding a pen to write on the blank space at the back, and finally turned the angle to push it towards him. Everyone for me, I for everyone. This is the meaning of this sentence, Huaisher explained. It's easy to understand. Let's start from this sentence. How about it? Neo Daoqin didn't speak, looking at him blankly. After a long time, he lowered his head and looked at the paper on the table, as if he didn't understand. Hence, Huaisher repeated it again, and then he used katakana to mark the pronunciation below. He explained the grammar, until Neo Daoqin repeated after him in a daze, and after confirming that every syllable was correct, Huaisher nodded in satisfaction. Isn't this obviously very talented? Remember to revise when you go back. Neo Dao Kuan, I will ask next time. Oh, okay. Neo Daoqin held the paper absent-mindedly and walked out of the office before he realized what had happened. But when he lowered his head, he saw the paragraph on the paper. How should he describe this feeling of absurdity? He didn't know. But this person was totally crazy, right? Does he have to teach me Latin as well? Just find a trash can and throw away the broken thing. That was what he thought at first, until he accidentally flipped to the front and saw the densely packed transfer records and all kinds of large sums of money. He froze on the spot and subconsciously squeezed the phone in his pocket. But then he subconsciously let go of it. He felt that he might have drunk a little too much and actually said so many absurd things and had so many absurd thoughts. When the slight drunkenness gradually dissipated, he raised his hand blankly and looked at the record in front of him. But the line of words on the back of the paper shone in with the sunlight outside the window. Everyone for me. I for everyone. Someone who would say such things should be crazy, right? What was in the mind of the person who taught this kind of thing? But what's the big deal about those who really memorized it? Was he an idiot? He closed his eyes and couldn't help but want to laugh bitterly. He suddenly felt that there must be something wrong with his brain, just like this bullsh asterisk T club. He actually realized that there was nothing to be afraid of even if he was sunk into Kyoto Bay in the future. Anyway, mixed-race people would die in the end. There didn't seem to be any difference between dying of illness at the age of 40 and dying suddenly at the age of 25. At worst, he would just run faster when the time came. When he turned his head, he finally mustered up the courage to push open the unlocked door behind him. Boss YG, after I finish learning this, can you teach me something new? In the office, the man who was feeding the crow turned his head. Seeing his expression, he smiled happily. The man nodded solemnly, as if he was more honored than him, and said, "Okay." Chapter 744. Cheers! With the sound of cheers and applause, the dinner of the Huaishur group came to an end in the middle of the night. Standing at the door and quietly watching the red-faced cadres leave with the help of his men, Huaishur smoked quietly. After a long time, he looked back at the messy cups and plates in the shop. It was not easy for the waiter to clean up. Do these supreme Taoists really not care about public morals at all? He sighed and apologized to the proprietress. "I'm sorry to trouble you again, Ms. Jean Jiang. What are you talking about? It's me who needs your care." The proprietress behind the counter laughed. "Today's wine is very expensive, and my shop can also make a lot of money." After that, she paused and looked at Huaishur. "You haven't eaten enough yet, have you?" Huaishur was puzzled. "After all, every time I go in to pass the dishes, I see you drinking. 2 plates of edamame can't fill my stomach." Ms. Jean Jiang asked, "Mr. Takahashi sent a very good tuna today. If you don't mind, would you like a bowl of tea rice? Isn't it about to close? How can we close before the guests finish eating?" Ms. Jean Jiang bowed slightly. "It's not a troublesome matter. Please sit down for a moment." After inviting Huaishur to take a seat at the bar, she turned around and went to the kitchen. Soon, she came out with a bowl of steaming tea rice. It was only a short time, but it was not rough. Not only was it exquisite, but the taste was also appetizing. "This taste is really good." Huaishur took 2 bites and nodded in praise. "It tastes different from other places. I figure out some of the skills myself." Ms. Jean Jiang waved her hand and smiled. "When I was a child, I was very interested in cooking, but my father didn't want me to enter the kitchen. Later, I secretly learned a little and thought I was good. Now it seems that it's just a superficial skill." After listening, Huaishur didn't say anything. He bowed his head and finished eating, then put down his chopsticks. "Thank you for your hospitality. Would you like something else?" "There's no need. I'm afraid that someone might be impatient." Huaishur smiled. After swiping his card to pay, he nodded and said goodbye. "Let's close the shop. Don't pay attention to the noise outside." Ms. Jean Jiang was stunned for a moment, but she seemed to be used to it. After sending Huaishur to the door, she turned off the light in front of the door and closed the door. Under the light from the door, Huaishur raised his head and stared at the figure at the other end of the street. It was late at night, and most of the restaurants on the food street had already closed their doors. Only a few taverns were still lit. The light shone through the windows and the cracks of the doors, separating the dim and narrow streets. It illuminated the newcomer's eyes. His beastly green vertical pupils were filled with savagery. "White paper man." The gray-haired man took the cigarette from the corner of his mouth and said in a hoarse voice, "That's me." Huaishur asked, "How should I address you?" "Akasaki Makoto." The person announced his name and told him calmly, "The president of the Luoha family's Jinchuan Association. So you're a member of the alliance. Sorry to have kept you waiting." Huaishur nodded in understanding. He didn't feel close because he was a member of the alliance. He didn't even show a polite smile. He just asked calmly, "It's so late. The president of the Jinchuan Association is waiting for me here. Is there a misunderstanding?" "I don't think so," Akasaki said coldly. "We're both green sons. You and I shouldn't fight. But recently, aren't you a bit too presumptuous? Relying on the protection of the president. Isn't it a bit too arrogant?" "How did I offend you?" Huaishir laughed softly. But it seems like you're not here to make me apologize, right? I'd like to explain my purpose and thoughts to you. Are you willing to listen? There's no need for unnecessary words. Akasaki slowly raised his head. With a hoarse voice, he showed the scar on his neck that almost cut off his entire neck. If you want to fight, you can talk with your fists. As long as your strength matches your arrogance, you can be as presumptuous as you want. The subordinate behind him walked up and took off his coat. He only wore a black sleeveless t-shirt. His muscles shone with a faint bronze light. He slowly clenched his right hand, making a sound of steel rubbing against each other. Sparks flew, illuminating his bestial eyes. His killing intent was overflowing. But Huaishir still stood there with his hands tied. He asked curiously, "Why should I fight with you?" If I remember correctly, the internal strife of the alliance can only be limited to the distribution of property, right? Then according to the rules of the alliance, you don't want my family's static electricity. Akasaki Makoto casually threw out his bargaining chip. In this division of property, it was one of the biggest pieces of meat left by my family. It used to rely on a high price to buy out many patents and low hybrid labor costs to establish a huge advantage in the electronic component industry. Although it was declining now, it was still a jaw-dropping asset. Compared to it, the profits brought by those billiard shops and traditional industries were not worth mentioning at all. This is indeed one of my goals. Huaishir nodded. However, since you've already taken it, I have nothing to bet with you. At most, the value of the entire Huai paper group is less than half of the static electricity. It doesn't matter. Akasaki Makoto raised his fists indifferently and got into a fighting stance. As long as you win, it's yours. If you lose, get out of the inner circle of Danbo, using static electricity to bet all the property of the Huai paper group. He wanted to copy Huaishir's background. Why? Huaishir sighed. Since it's Green Sun, why don't you persuade him? He looked into the darkness, not far away. Lawrence, who was smoking decadently, looked up and shook his head with a salted fish face. I want to persuade him, but you have to be willing to listen. Besides, according to the style of the two of you, you're going to fight sooner or later anyway, so it's better to settle things before the conflict intensifies. If you want to fight, feel free to. Before he finished speaking, a roar broke out in the air, like a cannon spewing deadly flames. A burning steel fist was already coming at him. In an instant, Akasaki Makoto crossed a distance of dozens of meters and was already close at hand. After the burning steel fist, his eyes almost burst out with a blazing light. Sliding step, then a straight punch. Huaishir subconsciously raised his arm to block in front of him, then felt his arm shake and almost lost feeling, and his whole body flew backward. His block was broken, and even the horn stuck to his skull was almost knocked off. This F***king strength was ridiculous. What kind of ghost was this? Huaishir quickly identified the characteristics of his opponent, trying to find the corresponding evil spirit in Ingzhou mythology. But soon, Akasaki's undisguised aura spread out. It wasn't Ingzhou, American genealogy, third order. Bosh Wadash. It was the largest thing in the world at the beginning of the era, described by the Native Americans. It was taller than the tallest tree in the world and swallowed everything on the ground. Its huge appetite was enough to eat everything in this vast world. But with the passage of time and the change of eras, it had disappeared without a trace before the arrival of the world of humans. Only those who pursued miracles searched for traces of the past, and barely reduced that ancient power to the scope of human understanding, and reappeared on the earth in the form of a mastodon. And now, this huge power exploded with Akasaki's movement, almost knocking out Huaishir on the spot. Before Huaishir landed, he saw Akasaki Makoto close in again. He was still sliding, and his burning steel fist was whistling, bypassing Huaishir's blocking arm. Hook! In the blink of an eye, Huaishir's blocking arm suddenly twisted and landed on Akasaki's sweeping forearm. His flying body suddenly stopped, and then like a horizontal bar player, he nimbly bypassed the hook and landed on the ground. Realization dawned on him. Boxing? That's really powerful. It's good that you think so. Akasaki Makoto once again assumed the offensive and defensive posture of a left guard, but his legs and elbows were slightly moving, which made Huaishur feel a faint threat. Obviously, his boxing was not limited to the rules of the ring, and his legs and elbows were also fierce. Hit the head, Akasaki 1 point. Lawrence, who was watching the show from above the trash can, excitedly raised his hand and announced. He looked like he was enjoying the show, which made people's teeth ache. They're starting the boxing match. Huaishur sighed, looked at the cumbersome clothes on his body, and ignored it. Instead, he followed his opponent's posture and assumed a boxing posture. It looked very loose, completely ridiculous, and he muttered something that no one else could understand. It's a pity that I don't listen to much rap. But it's okay, I'm already fired up. Boom! Akasaki slid forward, stirring up a hurricane, and his burning steel fist rushed forward again, aiming at the face exposed through the gap in his arm's defense jab. The terrifying speed was even faster than a kick or other attacks, as fast as lightning. In the blink of an eye, an explosion burst forth, but it didn't succeed in hitting Huaishur's face. This punch was blocked, but it was useless. The jab was just the opening remarks, and what followed was the main show of the combination of punches. Without thinking, Akasaki opened his eyes wide, straight forward, back, left hook, right swing, and in the blink of an eye, he skillfully threw 5 consecutive punches. Pong! The sound of metal scraping against metal rang out, and Huaishur's entire body was pushed back by 3 meters. However, she did not collapse from the barrage of punches as expected. Instead, Akasaki used the force of the impact to increase the distance between them. Akasaki's foot that had been aimed at Huaishur's foot missed and smashed into the ground, creating a huge crater. Mud splashed. Akasaki's chasing action slightly paused, and he recalled the moment just now. His combination of punches, a punch was dodged, a punch was hit, another punch was pushed away, and the last punch aimed at the abdomen was actually blocked. He lowered his head, and his eyes looked at Huaishur's left hand in front of his abdomen. It was precisely that hand that had stopped his fist. Under the intertwining light and shadow, that hand had actually turned crimson red. It emitted a blazing temperature. Didn't I say it already? Huaishur raised his head and grinned. I'm fired up. His blood was boiling. The handsome face under the horns had turned scarlet, almost dripping blood, as fierce as a ghost. The deep integration of the drummer and used steps, after using the source substance to unify the muscles of the whole body, it caused all the organs to overload and then burst out with power far beyond the past. Ultra state, release. And then, W steps. Huaishur suddenly disappeared from Akasaki's sight, and then the sound of wind came from behind Akasaki's head. Chapter 745. In the blink of an eye, Akasaki suddenly slid and turned around, and saw the figure that appeared behind him as if he had teleported. That was a scarlet face with a hideous smile, and the right hand that had already been raised, along with the sound of the drums and the hallucination, as if holding an invisible lead ball, pulled back, and then aimed at his face and punched out with the force of 1,000 pounds. Rather than a fist, it was better to say that the arm turned into a heavy flail, and the fist was thrown at the enemy's face. Drummer, backward straight punch. Akasaki's pupils contracted in an instant, but in this split second, he didn't slide back or dodge. Instead, he suddenly lowered his body, lowered his head, and at the critical moment, brushed past Huaishur's fist and rushed forward. The steel fist at his waist was clenched, and sparks flew. Uppercut punch. If this punch hit, even if it was a cement block, it would be like a meteor rushing into the sky, soaring in the night, right? The skill that had been honed in countless battles, the flawless counterattack that had been tempered thousands of times, actually missed at this moment. His movement stopped in place, and Huaishur had already retreated a few meters away. As if nothing had happened just now, it was just that both sides had changed positions. His smile was pleasant. Bashvadash's strength was definitely far above his own. Bashvadash, who had placed almost all of his attribute points on strength and constitution, was definitely a machine of destruction in a head-on battle that could not be avoided. But in this kind of street battle that didn't have the range of the arena, he didn't have enough mobility. To be exact, he didn't have the nerve reflexes and explosive speed that the Heaven's Inquisition stigmata built around the upper limit of the body's coordination. But unfortunately, he couldn't stay in this state for long. Speaking of which, you are so hostile to me. It can't be that I have offended you, right? Huaishir asked casually. If the people who attended the banquet last night were as strong as you, I would have paid attention. What did I do to offend you? Between you and me, there is no grudge. Akasaki answered indifferently and maintained his posture, approaching step by step. I just can't stand someone who doesn't know how to restrain himself. I don't think I did anything overboard. Huaishir laughed. But if there is no grudge, then it's easy. Akasaki, what do you want to do after getting the silent electron? What do you mean? Akasaki indifferently stayed in place. Her eyes swept over Huaishir's vital points, ready to attack. What I mean is, if it's for money, I can give it all to you. If it's convenient, can you give me the silent communications electronics? Even if it's just a name, it's not a problem. Just treat it as a secret between us. What do you think? Huaishir suggested excitedly. Money? House? Car? Drink? Yacht? If you have any other requests, I can help you with them. I have a wide range of channels. Lawrence can testify to this, even if what you want is something money can't buy. As long as it's not too outrageous, I can help you solve it. Aha, that would be a waste. Lawrence next to him laughed. No matter how much money you give, Akasaki will only use it to bet on horses. Ha, it's better to waste money than this. Akasaki narrowed her eyes. Her expression became colder and colder. What nonsense are you talking about? I'm serious, Akasaki. Huaishir stared at the enemy's eyes, solemnly suggested. Shouldn't you also seriously consider it? Did you become a team leader by relying on your mouth? Akasaki sneered. I don't see the need to do this, and I'm not interested in considering your proposal. I just want to beat you up. A loud sound like a cannon shot burst out again. Akasaki's footsteps crisscrossed, as if she was skating on ice, plowing out two trails, and the fist that had been accumulating power for a long time had already struck out. But Huaishir took a step back, letting the strong wind hit his face, perfectly keeping 10 centimeters away from Akasaki's attack range. He tried to dodge, but it was not that easy. However, when he continuously dodged backward, he knocked over the sign of a home izakaya behind him, and his movement paused for a moment. Opportunity! Akasaki's origin form burned. The sound of an elephant burst out. The iron fist struck out. A perfect combination of punches, instantly breaking Huaishir's structure. Then, the real killing move, right hook. A roar burst out. The hurricane whistled. Huaishir flew out. With one punch, he was actually smashed a long distance, crossing 61 meters, directly flying out of the restaurant street, and smashing into an innocent car at the street corner. A sharp alarm sounded, and thick smoke spread. In a gradually calming storm, Akasaki expressionlessly put down his fist and looked away. Victory and defeat had been decided. Being hit by his right hook, even if it was a sublimator of the same level who specialized in defense, half of the bones would be broken and sent to the ICU. Just so. It's not over yet, Akasaki-kun. Lawrence sat cross-legged on a trash can, drinking the cheap beer in his hand with a smile that was not a smile, smacking his lips. You've been cheated. Akasaki's expression froze, and he suddenly turned his head, looking behind him. At the place where Huaishir was originally hit, the bricks on the ground had quietly turned into powder. And now that he thought about it carefully, the direction where Huaishir flew out was not the direction where he attacked. At that moment, he relied on an unknown technique to remove most of the power, and then took advantage of the impact to retreat, giving him the illusion that he was sent flying. But in reality, rather than saying that the guy was sent flying by him, it was better to say that he used the momentum to jump out. In the long distance, the power of the impact was eliminated, and what he suffered in the end was just a negligible amount. At this moment, from the wreckage of the car, a sorry figure suddenly stretched out his hand, pulled on the car's basket, and climbed up with difficulty. The clothes on his upper body had already been shattered by Akasaki's attack, and a tragic bruise and scar could be faintly seen on his chest, but only a broken bone. A small problem. Blood flowed from his forehead. It fell on the corner of his mouth. Huaishur climbed up from the wreckage, raised his head, and showed a happy smile to Akasaki across the long distance, as if the pain caused by the other party was not worth mentioning. Say something unrelated, Akasaki-kun. Let's continue the topic from before. Huaishur raised his hand, pulled off the cumbersome rags on his body, and casually twisted his neck in the crisp sound. He said to himself, "Do you know, today in my group, someone told me his dream is to go to school and learn Latin. To be honest, his talent is a bit bad, and his foundation is not solid, but it doesn't matter. I believe that he can become better." He raised his head and said seriously, "Everything can change for the better. It should have changed for the better. I don't have a habit of talking in my sleep with people." Akasaki coldly responded, and once again got into position. "No, I just want to tell you that I want to change everything." Huaishur stepped forward step by step and solemnly said to him, "At least, let those who desire change have a chance to start over. Unfortunately, there are too many things I want to do, but my time is too short. I need to get more allies, and I need to win more fame. If you think I'm too presumptuous and offended you, please don't mind. I can say sorry to you. But you need to understand that this place can become better than now. Is there something wrong with your brain?" Akasaki couldn't help but sneer. "Just giving people free beer, and you're already thinking about being a king? If I have to be a king to do these things, I don't mind." Huaishur asked in a matter-of-fact way, "If there has to be a person to do it, why can't it be me?" Akasaki's face froze. Huaishur's voice continued, "The water supply company is just the first step. Akasaki, clean drinking water, unspoiled food, unexpired medicine, and necessary medical treatment. Those things that can be seen everywhere like air outside the inner circle of Dambois, I want to bring them here." He spoke so arrogantly and dreamily, like a castle in the air. He was just like an ignorant and rebellious person who didn't know how to restrain himself at all. He had an irritating confidence and an unpleasant smile. It's simply irrational. "How about it, Akasaki? My proposal just now still stands." Huaishur smiled, stretched out his hand, and invited, "This is a rare opportunity. Do you want to join?" "You're crazy, Huaishur." Akasaki flatly refused, and his expression became colder. "I have no interest in your dream talk. If you want power and fame, come and defeat me." He coldly said, "It's better to use your fist." "Okay." Huaishur nodded his head in agreement. "I'll come and get it now." In that instant, Huaishur's body trembled, and his heart pumped, squeezing the nearly boiling blood, releasing a low rumble. It was like the sound of a heavenly drum. The surging blood was ignited, bringing with it a terrifying amount of heat. It wildly surged through his body, squeezing out every bit of his potential. It burned him into a scarlet-red color. Exceeding the limit, once again, in the blink of an eye, the burning demon was already within reach. He grinned, smiling at Akasaki. So fierce, so fast, even faster than before. Akasaki's pupils instantly contracted, and he unhesitatingly swung his fist, but the hurricane was already in front of him. He suddenly pulled back his raised arm, blocking in front of him. Two solid arms came together, like a shield of steel, blocking in front of him. Immediately afterwards, a loud rumble sounded. Not far away, Lawrence's pupils contracted, and his 5 fingers subconsciously clenched, not even noticing the beer on his face. Third-level origin substance fluctuations. Why sure he had advanced? The information from Tengu Mountain was actually true. This guy really was Dai Tengu's personal disciple. At the same time, Akasaki's heart was filled with shock that was not inferior to Lawrence's. Huaishu's fist had actually shaken his defensive stance. The speed that had erupted in that instant was simply too terrifying, and the strength contained within was not just for show. Even Bosch-Kvadosh was shocked. But this was the end. After using all of his strength, there would inevitably be a gap. And then, boom, another loud rumble sounded. Akasaki's eyes widened. In front of him, Huaishu, who had just used all of his strength, did not pause at all. Like flowing water, he naturally raised his fist again and punched the enemy's defense. A straight punch. The power and speed that was not inferior to the previous one exploded once again, forming a fist that was as impressive as wind and thunder. Immediately afterwards, another punch. Left hook, right hook, jab, swing, straight punch. The combination of punches that he had just learned was tested on Akasaki's body. Countless thunderous sounds overlapped, forming a continuous series of loud rumbles. The performance of 1812 Overture had reached its climax. The horn for counterattack was blown here. The never-ending bombardment had begun. The rumbling continued without end. Akasaki's back was bent, and he stiffly maintained his defensive stance. He was in disbelief, unable to understand, and unable to understand. How could there be such a tyrannical combination of attacks in this world? It was not limited to exploding with power that was several times stronger than the previous punch, but instead pursued a continuous attack, making the impact as vast as a storm to drown the enemy. After abandoning the originally flawed sky-shattering heavens, this was an application style that Huaishur had personally developed on the basis of drummers. Based on the overdrive state, the rhythm changes of the performance method were integrated, and the beat interval represented by each movement and step was compressed to the limit. In the end, it was a torrent of more than 200 beats per second. This kind of attack, was there really an end to it? Akasaki roared angrily behind the defense of his arms, stubbornly maintaining his defense. How could the body of a sublimator maintain such a terrifying frequency without paying any price? This was simply impossible. No matter how terrifying the technique was, it would be limited by the human body. There was a limit to the human body. No matter how violent the attack was, there would be an end. There would always be an opening. An opening. Behind the narrow gap between his arms, Akasaki's eyes were bloodshot. He stubbornly endured the storm in front of him, waiting for the moment when he would reveal an opening, waiting for the critical moment of victory to arrive. At this moment, behind the defense of his arms, Akasaki sneered. Now, in that instant, Huaishur's right fist paused for a moment in his defense, a short gap of less than 0.1 seconds. The distance between victory and defeat was right here. Akasaki Makoto roared and charged forward. He punched out with his burning fists, and the wind howled as it expanded from the bottom to the top. Uppercut, but right in front of him, Huaishur's figure didn't retreat. Instead, he advanced in the direction of his fist, taking the initiative to shorten the distance between them and closing in. Even the crimson face seemed to flicker for a brief moment, like a flickering image on an old television. No, it wasn't Huaishur's problem. It was him. Was it his eyes? There was a sudden, buzzing sound in his head. Then, the delayed impact spread out, and a heavy pain spread from his chin. Then, the second wave. The third wave. In the darkness, he tried his best to open his eyes, but he could only see the afterimage of Huaishur's left arm moving. What a beautiful jab! That was his last thought before he lost consciousness. With a dull thud, Huaishur's movements stiffened in midair. He panted violently. Sweat poured out of his pores and quickly evaporated, like a spiraling fog. After a full 41 seconds of continuous bombardment, he was approaching his limit like never before. If not for the fact that Akasaki couldn't stand the humiliation of being suppressed by a boxing newbie for so long and was eager to counterattack, he might have beaten himself to death. Now that he stopped, his limbs began to twitch rapidly. His muscles whined and seeped with blood. He was almost unable to move. Just now, they were only a moment away from victory, and when Huaishur lowered his head, half of a broken horn fell from his forehead, bringing with it traces of blood. This was the result of being grazed by that punch. Akasaki's biggest mistake was not to counterattack, but to use the uppercut in order to defeat his opponent in one blow. He was too confident that Huaishur had reached his limit and forgot about his speed. At that moment, when Akasaki attacked, Huaishur launched a counterattack. His target was also his chin. Jab. In the blink of an eye, 3 consecutive punches. At the same distance, the speed of the jab was much faster than any other technique, The impact on the chin instantly spread to the brain. No one's brain could withstand 3 consecutive jabs in such a short period of time. KO. The winner has been decided. In the dead silence, Lawrence threw away his beer can and applauded for this wonderful boxing match. Amazing, really amazing. As he spoke, he lowered his head and looked at the person on the ground with a strange smile. Akasaki, you don't regret losing, right? On the ground, the unconscious Akasaki twitched and twitched again. Soon, his originally empty eyes trembled, and he woke up from his concussion. After a long time, he finally reacted to everything that had just happened. When he raised his head and looked to Huai Shi, his expression became complicated. I lost. Although his tone was defeated, there was no resentment or anger. Akasaki was willing to accept his loss. Silent Electronics is yours. Huai Kijin, you can do whatever you want. And he raised his head and glanced at Lawrence. According to our agreement, I will give up my position. In the future, the members of Green Sun in the Alliance will be led by Huai Kijin. Huai Shi stared blankly for a long time and looked at Lawrence blankly. What's going on? Literally, Lawrence shrugged. Didn't you say yesterday that you wanted Green Sun to support you? In the future, Green Sun's manpower in the Alliance will be handed over to you. A total of 6 groups, 11 or 12 ascendants, not many. Huai Shi stared. I always thought the person in charge was you. Lawrence rolled his eyes. Do I look like I'm working for that old man, Simu? Moreover, I'm not a hybrid. That old man is very wary of me. It's just right for me to hand it over to you. So careless? Extreme time, extreme method. Lawrence whistled. Don't you still have such grand dreams? Work hard, all right. After the two decided the winner and loser, and after getting a feel of Huai Kijin's background, he was very satisfied with this tool that would replace him in the future. What is this? This is the mainstay of Green Sun in the future. After casually exhorting a few more words, Lawrence said that he had something to call and ran off to who knows where. In the silence, Huai Shi watched his figure go away and couldn't help but feel bald. Do you illegal organizations hand over power so casually? Don't you need to build up your qualifications and talk about relationships? Isn't this a bit too fast? I, a spy of the Astronomy Association, became the leader of Green Sun in the modern realm in just a few days. What should I do next? Catch myself? Thinking that he might be caught on the spot by AI Ching in the future, Huai Shi's expression twitched. Numb. In the silence, he sighed, turned around, and looked at Akasaki, who was smoking silently. What are you going to do next, Kakasaki-kun? No plans. Akasaki replied coldly. By the way, I don't have the hobby of drinking after a fight with my opponent, so I don't need such invitations. No, that's not what I meant. Huai Shi pinched his chin, looked at his conflicted expression, and suddenly laughed. Since the fight is over, then the proposal just now. Do you want to reconsider it? Akasaki frowned. Don't be so cold. Money is easy to talk about, and other things can be discussed. Huai Shi reached out his hand and sincerely invited him. How about doing me a favor? Do you want to come together? Do I look like I'll believe your nonsense? Akasaki sneered. These were the last words he said before he got possessed and boarded the pirate ship. Chapter 746. The next day, Jin Chuan Kai's announcement once again caused an uproar in the Alliance. As one of the most powerful organizations in the Alliance, Jin Chuan Kai was not only a trusted vassal of the Law family, but Akasaki Makoto himself was also recognized as the leader of all Green Sun members in the Alliance. Now, under the witness of Green Sun's envoy, Lawrence, Akasaki Makoto not only gave up his position and allowed a new young man to ride on his head, but also announced that Jin Chuan Kai would be deeply cooperating with Huai Ji Group. Both sides would implement the construction plan of the new Class 2 substation within half a year. After the contract with Solander Power Group was signed at the border, Dambwa Inner Circle would gradually have a stable power supply capacity. In addition, that morning, he accompanied Huai Shi to visit the other 6 extreme gangs with Green Sun backing. Among these 6 groups, some people strongly supported Huai Shi's appointment, while others had some complaints. There were also some people who clearly opposed it and expressed that the paper effigy was nothing. But without exception, no matter what the atmosphere was at the beginning, at the end, it was the group leaders who enthusiastically sent the two people out of the door. They repeatedly urged them to stay and were reluctant to let them go, showing how deep their friendship was. As for the 3 emergency beds in the ICU, it didn't matter. Huaiji Group could afford it. Next, Huaiji Group won the big news of Jingtong Electronics, but the others didn't feel anything. Instead, they felt, oh, that's it? It seems that there's nothing to be amazed about. Instead, there was a strange illusion of, oh, it's normal. Numbness. It was not limited to within the alliance. Now, in the entire Dambwa inner circle, whether it was illegal workers or hooligans, homeless, poor people, or unrelated people, they had learned to respectfully salute and greet the young man who often went downstairs for a stroll and occasionally came to buy fruits in front of their own alley. Here, strength represented authority, and authority represented everything. The existence of Huaiji Group was like a boulder falling from the sky, setting off a steady stream of ripples from the quagmire of Dambwa inner circle. And in just a few days, the existence of Huaiji Man gradually became a legend in absurd stories. Even if you threw away the nonsense, the actual traces left behind were still shocking enough. He came to the inner circle of Dambwa. On the first day, he burned down the Russian Federation's Aisha house. On the second day, he became the leader of the White Paper Group. On the 5th day, he massacred the Tiger King Group. On the 6th day, he offended the Illumination Church and even got someone to pin the saint down and beat her up. On the 7th day, he was personally invited by the current guild leader to attend the Alliance's banquet. Then, he hooked up with Heavenly Eyes Pear Blossom during the banquet. The next day, he took over the new Luo group, and the next night, he won a fight with Akasaki Makoto and won. In half a month's time, one incident after another, every piece of news made one's scalp go numb. Where did this evil spirit come from? Of course, this also caused Huaishi's reputation to be damaged. His public image gradually changed from an idiot who gave free beer to people to drink to a demon who killed people and brewed blood wine every day. However, a bad reputation was better than no reputation at all. Moreover, in the world of extreme Tao, reputation itself was a part of prestige. Moreover, the existence of the Huaiheim Group had gradually begun to show its positive influence in the inner circle of the Pill Wave. Under Huaishi's control, the streets where the Huaiheim Group was located were all the cleanest. The standard of the protection fee was the most reasonable, especially after dealing with the people who came to cause trouble. The fees collected could be used to cover 1/3 of the cost in the shop. It was just a small change, but a large group of people were grateful. Isn't it a little too expensive to do good deeds in the gangs these days? Huaisher sat in his office, looking at the sparks in the cage of dreams. He felt the smooth operation of young Master Ming's destiny, and even he found it hard to believe. The distortion caused by the crows was constantly being corrected by the inner circle of the Pill Wave. Young Master Ming's divinity was achieving a balance between hell and reality. Now, when he walked in the territory of the Huaiheim Group, young Master Ming's power had a slight increase and enhancement. Her body felt refreshed, and her perception of evil was also more sensitive. Even the wind outside the window was much more refreshing. It was as if he was lying in his own backyard, incomparably comfortable and peaceful. Under his efforts over the past few days, the origin substance projections of the Huaiheim Group in the Cage of Dreams had gradually become clearer, and the number of projections had also increased along with the increase in favorability. The number of members whose favorability with the Huaiheim Group had increased from 30 to 70. In other words, Huaisher already had 73 members who were absolutely reliable and could borrow the power of the crows at any time. And if Huaisher continued to cultivate carefully, even more reserve members could be turned into regular members. I feel like something's not right. Huaisher rubbed his chin, carefully examining the Cage of Dreams. He suddenly felt like there's something wrong with young Master Ming's stigmata, right? With young Master Ming's stigmata as a foundation, this kind of a legal organization was far too easy to manage. It was far too convenient. Not only could he check their favorability and loyalty at any time, with the foundation from before, as well as the divinity's influence, as well as other aspects of negotiation, young Master Ming had a strong passive effect. When Huaishur intentionally used it, the effects were so good that they couldn't even be described as ridiculous. Did you just realize? Tongyi's handwriting appeared on fate. This is the proper way to use it. Otherwise, did you really think that young Master Ming was running a zoo in hell? Huaishur felt like his brain wasn't enough to process all of this. Do you remember what I said before? Heaven's Inquisition, in celestial genealogy, is a support stigmata and is in charge of logistics. Its core power is sharing. Tongyi helplessly reminded him. Luckily, you're in the deluxe version. Otherwise, with your Berserker playstyle, this account would have been destroyed a long time ago. The proper way to use it is, starting from the first stage, Spirit Ritual, you can spread malice and ashes. When you reach the second stage, Mountain Ghost, you can nurture and level up, sharing life force. When you reach the third stage, Young Master Ming, you can combine the two and nurture the growth of a large group. At the same time, you can further share this power. Otherwise, why would I have you gather all 4 types of enlightenment before advancing? The birth of life, the true essence of nothingness, the connection of souls, yesterday's illusion. At this point, her handwriting became playful. Take a guess. What was the power you used on Shangya a few days ago called in ancient times? Huaishur was stunned and carefully recalled. After receiving Iron Crow's buff, Shangya's physical strength doubled. He was full of energy and had infinite strength. He was almost comparable to an ascendant who had finished puberty. If his large group could transform further, it would be like indirectly bestowing a stigmata. It was just that they hadn't completely merged into one, and there was no qualitative change. Invulnerable to swords and spears, invulnerable to fire and water. Wasn't this like inviting a god to possess him? Wait, his whole body went numb. God, fight? Yes, he didn't need to think to know how much Tongyi was gloating. Are you stupid? This is a stigmata with missionary specialization. It's a necessary divine skill for illegal clans. It's most suitable for people like you who rely on their faces to make a living. It's a waste of talent to use it as an idol. You don't think that illegal clans only include triads, right? No way. No way, right? If this was in ancient times, you would have long been a saint, a leader, or a living demigod. Unfortunately, you were born in the wrong time. Ha 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 ha. In silence, Huaishur closed the Book of Destiny. Then he took out the Rope of Sorrow and wrapped it around 12 times. He added 2 layers of locks and stuffed it back into his soul. He didn't want to talk to this woman anymore. When Downhill walked in the office, he saw his team leader's salted fish face. He was so scared that he almost jumped up. Boss, what happened to you? He subconsciously wanted to reach for his gun. He looked around, suspecting that there was an enemy attack. No, it's nothing. Huaishur waved his hand dispiritedly. I just happened to realize that the direction I'm working hard in and the area I'm good at seemed to be a little different. Life is so mysterious. Downhill, this strange sense of impact, is it only like this in childhood? Or is it always like this? Downhill had 100,000 question marks on his head. Then, he turned around and made sure that he had closed the door behind him. If the group of people outside who were promoted to be team leaders from birth saw this, their faith would probably collapse. What did he want to say? Ahem, team leader. Downhill squeezed out a serious expression with difficulty. The team leaders of the Fushan Group, Ci Xing Group, and Wang Tang Group have arrived. What do you think? Oh, yes. Yes. Huaishur finally woke up. He propped himself up from the chair and rubbed his face. Where are we? In the reception room. Downhill said, I think those people are a little bit unfriendly. Do you think? No. Since they are willing to come, there is a possibility of negotiation. There is no need to threaten or coerce them. Otherwise, what's the difference between a gang and a gang, right? Downhill's face twitched, and he looked at his team leader's smile. You were definitely going to say gangsters, right? Earlier, in the headquarters of the Fushan Group, there was a gloomy fog in the conference room. Several team leaders who received the appointment sat in chairs, smoking in silence, frowning, and no one spoke. In the long silence, the president of the Fushan group finally couldn't stand it. He put out the cigarette and coughed twice. I think this wave of people from the Huaiji group came with bad intentions. Who said not? It's unsettling. Yes, yes. The other team leaders nodded their heads one after another, but no matter what they said, it was as if their mouths were stuffed with a tape recorder. There was nothing useful at all, but everyone could feel that the pressure was great. Speaking of which, this matter was too strange. Everyone was doing well at home. They were happily collecting the protection fees. Although they did not earn much money, they won in terms of stability. Their days were quite comfortable. A few of the team leaders inexplicably received a transaction proposal from the Huaiji group at the same time. They wanted to exchange a few high-end shopping malls, shops in bustling areas, and more profitable sites nearby for the vegetable market in their own territory. Chapter 747. The Vegetable Market. Damn it, why? Why would you trade a rich place for a vegetable market? Are you out of your mind? Even an idiot would know that there was something fishy going on. To be honest, we don't need to worry about the Huaiji group plotting against our Wang Tongzhu. Team leader Wang Tongzhu frowned and said in a thick border dialect, "If you want to exchange, we have no objection. But the problem is that when the time comes, the market will be given out. Whether or not we can exchange for anything is another matter." The Cixing Association also nodded. This is really strange. Yes, yes. In the end, the leader of the Huangshan group, who had run out of words, could only repeat and nod in agreement. But we don't dare not to trade. The president of the Fushan Society said with a sad face, "Our business is small, and it's not even as big as the Jinchuan Society. What if we annoy that crazy murderer, and he comes to find us at night? It's very dangerous. We have to be careful." Yes, yes. The leader of the Huangshan group continued to nod and awkwardly repeated what he just said. For now, please listen to me. The president of the Fushan Society heaved a long sigh. It seemed that it was impossible to count on these fools to have any ideas, so he had to do it himself. He immediately proposed, "In my opinion, it is impossible not to change it, but how to change it is a problem." Indeed. Wang Tongzhu nodded. This is the easiest place for problems to happen. Yes, yes. The leader of the Huangshan group had given up thinking. Everyone here knows that the Fushan Society has a little relationship with the Huangchuan family. The old master even left us a little friendship. We don't need to be afraid of the Huaiji group. The president of the Fushan Society showed a trace of fierceness in his eyes. So, in my opinion, since the Huaiji group is up to no good, we don't need to follow the rules of the Jianghu. Didn't they want to trade? Give them more things. No matter whether they give them or not, after signing the contract, we'll go to the Huangchuan family and ask the master to make the decision for us. I don't believe that the Huaiji group dares to go back on their word. What a brilliant plan. The president of the Cixing Association heard this, and his eyes lit up. It's a good idea. That's right, that's right. Then, the president of the Fushan Kai finally raised his eyes and revealed his foxtail. However, since it was me who stepped in and used my favor, shouldn't I take more of the property when the time comes? Seeing that someone wanted to touch their cake, the others immediately became vigilant. There's room for discussion. Indeed, we should discuss the ratio carefully. That's right, that's right. In short, although there were some bumps, this matter was finally settled successfully. All the groups joined forces to fight against the hegemony of Huaiji group. They wanted to snatch a piece of meat from this exchange. Therefore, from the moment they entered the reception room, this group of old fellows did not give them any good looks. Instead, they commented on the outdated decorations around them with disdain. After taking a sip of the tea, he clicked his tongue twice and threw it to the side. He scoffed. Just like that, he waited quietly. Gradually, the footsteps outside the door approached. There was a dead silence in the conference room, and everyone's breathing suddenly quickened. The door was pushed open, and the young man who hurried and raised his head and smiled at them. "Oh, sorry to keep you waiting. Something came up, and I had to deal with it." You didn't wait too long, did you? Humph. You actually let us, the president of the Fukuyama Society snorted, and then the young man looked at him. Quiet and tranquil, pure darkness surged in that pair of eyes. They were exquisite like ink-colored gems, suffused with a light that made people feel uneasy. The curved horns on his head were like those of an evil spirit, but one of the horns in front of his forehead was already broken. The sharp stubble had an iron-like cold light, faintly appearing. Fukuma Yoshimasa's voice paused, and the corners of his eyes twitched slightly. Suddenly, he squeezed out a smile. You let us rest for so long. Group leader Huai is really considerate. Ah, that's easy, that's easy. Huai nodded and was about to say something, but his brows suddenly wrinkled, and it was difficult to hide his anger. A terrible pressure instantly shrouded the entire conference room, and even breathing had become difficult. When everyone was uneasy, they saw him angrily slam the table. The group of people below, why don't they know how to treat guests? After the tea was served, there was no one left. Don't they know how to change the tea when it's cold? Under the mountain. Where the hell is under the mountain? That's how I taught you to treat guests. With a bang, the teacups on the table jumped up, splashing muddy water. The sharp sound of porcelain rubbing against each other seemed to be scratching everyone's heart, making their excitement pause. Outside the door, the man who hurried and hurriedly bowed. I'm very, very sorry. If saying sorry is useful, what's the use of rules? With a clang, a short knife was thrown in front of him. Huaiji angrily scolded. Are you arrogant? Don't you even know how to respect? You have to know shame. Do you know shame? Yes. Under the Mountain nodded, picked up the knife from the ground, and suddenly walked up with a ferocious face. Before they could react, he slammed his hand on the table, grabbed the knife with the other hand, and inserted it directly on the table with his little finger. Bang! Immediately after, he roared with a trembling voice. Under the Mountain, I'm asking for your forgiveness. Seeing that blood was about to be spilled on the spot, the president of the Fushan Society's face turned green. He quickly held down the hand of Under the Mountain and dissuaded, No, no. As he spoke, he winked at the people behind him, meaning that they were a group of idiots. If they really let him cut off the tea, believe it or not, he would exchange his little finger for their whole families. Suddenly, everyone reacted and was in a hurry. Cough, cough. No need to do this. Old people need to drink herbal tea. We deliberately let it cool. Yes, I love herbal tea and cold dishes. Yes, yes. The leader of the Huangshan group continued to repeat. Is that really the case? Huaishir asked suspiciously. The group of people nodded like they were pounding garlic. In an instant, the sky cleared up after the rain, and Huaishir's anger dissipated. I see. I'm misunderstood. Sorry. No, it's okay. Everyone wiped their sweat and nodded quickly with a smile. That's enough. Under the Mountain, there's nothing for you to do here. You can go now. Huaishir waved his hand. Just this once, understand? Yes. Under the Mountain pulled out the knife, bowed, and turned to leave. The conference room returned to silence. As for Huaishir, she looked at their faces and smiled. That smile was too familiar. It was as if a ferocious beast was looking at its prey. I think everyone knows what I mean. Huaishir opened his mouth and said slowly, In order to avoid any misunderstanding, I'd like to reiterate that I want to replace the dishes in your hands with some parts of the Huai paper group. Bang. With a muffled sound, the table suddenly shook, interrupting his words. Fukuma Masayoshi slammed the table, suddenly stood up, and roared in a low voice. No. Ask. Questions. What? Huaishir was stunned. The others were also stunned. F***, you old bastard. Why is it different from what we agreed on? Well, President Fukuyama, there's no need to be so agitated. Huaishir said. Think carefully, bang. With another muffled sound, the president of the CI Xing Association stood up and said solemnly, Group leader Huaishir, what are you saying? We're all brothers in the alliance. Rounding up, the Huai paper group is our brothers. Speaking of this, he raised his voice. It's just a vegetable market. It's not a problem. Yes. The leader of the Wong Tang group reacted and raised his hand to slam the table, but Huaisher looked back. His movements stiffened, and he put down his hand and nodded crazily. Don't talk about exchange. We can get it to you for free. At this time, the leader of the Huangxiang group was in a bad mood. F***CK. Why are you guys so different from what we agreed on? What kind of medicine did you take? Even the biker gang and the foolish company can't turn around as fast as you guys. Most importantly, you guys have said all the good words. What the F***CK do you want me to say? In the dead silence, under everyone's gaze, the leader of the Huangxiang group stuttered for a long time. His face turned red, and finally, he straightened his neck and opened his eyes wide. Me too. Thus, the dust settled. Today was another day for the repeater to make a killing. Then take care, everyone. I won't send you off. After signing the agreement and signing in black and white, Huaisher smiled and sent the group leaders all the way to the door. The group leaders also warmly said goodbye again and again. Just like this, they watched the group of old men leave. At this time, Yamashita came out from the corner again and looked in the direction of the group of old men. He snorted coldly. A group of idiots still thinking of extorting money from the Huai paper group. Seems like they know what's good for them. Huaisher shrugged. He suddenly felt regretful that he didn't have a chance to break a boulder on his chest that he arranged. Thinking of this, he tilted his head and pointed to the back. Quickly tell Takamura that the boulder-breaking program is canceled. Don't let Yeshima stand in the yard shirtless. Isn't he cold? Turning back, Huaisher ordered Otaku to quickly implement the land exchange. After stamping it and sending it to the president, the next stage of the market transformation and vegetable supply bidding could begin. The supermarkets in Yingzhou had always had problems. The vegetables on the shelves were all small boxes, and they didn't even want to sell the defective products that had fallen leaves. They were simply crazy. They weren't spoiled, and it wasn't like they couldn't be eaten. Anyway, it was better than buying rotten vegetables, dead fish, and stinky shrimps next to the smelly gutters filled with mosquitoes and flies. When the time came, he could get a batch of defective products at a low price and sell them at a discount. Wouldn't that open up the market? Thinking about random things in his mind, Huaisher sat near the door and waited for Weno to drive back. By the time he figured out what to do, the car had already stopped in front of the Huai Paper Group's gate. The car window rolled down, revealing Akaki's ugly face. Every time he saw him, Huaisher was curious from the bottom of his heart. Why was someone who had a favorability of more than 80 still able to give him such a bad face? What was this? Was it the pride of Yingzhou's specialty? Akaki glanced at Huaisher and couldn't help but frown. You plan to wear this to the Empire Casino? Chapter 748. Huaisher lowered his head and looked at himself. He was wearing a pair of comfortable gray pants, a t-shirt with the words, I love Tambie printed on it, and a pair of slippers that every boy loved. Was there a problem? He was confused from the bottom of his heart. He always wore this to the Jinling Astronomy Conference, so what was wrong with going to the Empire Casino? Akasaki Makoto couldn't help but roll his eyes. Whatever. Get in the car, it's almost time. The Empire Casino is closed for the day. It's already closed, it's not just for me. He got up, patted the dust off his body, and got into the car. I don't understand you guys. It's only a 10-minute walk, but you still have to take a car. You guys have too much money to burn. Akasaki Makoto rolled his eyes and was speechless. The Empire Casino Hotel was not far from the Dambwa Inner Circle. It stood in the middle of the busiest street in the entire Dambwa Inner Circle, towering into the clouds. When countless neon lights lit up, the gorgeous lights shone in all directions, like a lighthouse for gamblers. It was the only place in the dark area that shone with light. There were no shacks or rundown streets here. It was clean and peaceful, as if they had come to another world. The bright streets were filled with warm smiles. Those half-breed vagrants who looked ragged and ruined the appearance of the city couldn't walk within 2 streets at all. Under the unified control of the 5 big shots, this place had always been the most glamorous place in Dambwa's inner circle. At the same time, it was also a place to earn huge amounts of money from the outside world. It was as if they had come to another world in a trance. Everything was so dazzling and even the air was filled with a strong fragrance. Behind the fountain square, on the towering steps, a magnificent door slowly opened. Mixed-race attendants, who were specially selected for their appearance, respectfully welcomed the two into the huge hall. A huge crystal lamp hung from the specially raised ceiling, and it shone evenly, illuminating the huge and exquisite oil paintings around them. The sound of a piano echoed in the sound of a gurgling stream. Her sweet laughter filled his ears. Huaisha froze in place, her eyes widening in confusion. "I should have told you to change your clothes." Akasaki Makoto couldn't help but sigh. "Now it's awkward, isn't it?" In the entire hall, Huaisha was the only one who was wearing a t-shirt and shorts. He felt the countless strange gazes around him. When he turned around and looked around, he saw beautiful women in the lounge area of the hall. Some were mature and elegant, some were sweet and fragrant, and all of them were dressed differently. They were scattered on the sofa. Their curvaceous bodies were accentuated by their hot or conservative clothes. Their eyes seemed to be smiling, and when they swept their eyes around, it was a spring scene that made one's heart flutter. "Hey, don't act like you haven't seen the world." Akasaki Makoto bumped Huaisha's shoulder and reminded him sternly, "Don't let me find out that you've done anything wrong to Miss Rika, or else I won't let you off." Huaisha was dumbfounded. If King will not let her down too. Why don't you ask if she cannot let me down? All right, now he finally understood why Akasaki Makoto didn't like him. It turned out that he was Miss Rika's loyal bootlicker. He should really get to know Miss Rika better and compare their strengths. If he had done this earlier, there wouldn't have been so much trouble. Huaisha rolled his eyes and retracted his gaze. He sighed. There are so many rich and beautiful ladies. Who said that mixed-race people are poor? Do you really think they're customers here? Akasaki Makoto snorted. Huaisha paused and turned around. He saw a few people leaning on others and hugging each other as they walked toward the elevator. Even though he knew that in Yingzhou, customs were legal, Huaisha couldn't react in time. They weren't customers, they were merchandise. The Luaha family's business? Huaisha asked. Akasaki Makoto glanced back. The Luaha family's business hasn't fallen to this extent. They're all upstairs. The ones in the hall are all done by themselves. The elevator door closed. They ascended quickly. After the attendant swiped his card, they went all the way up and soon arrived at the entrance of the casino. After verifying their identities, the entrance that was no longer open to the public actually opened. It was noisy inside the huge venue. However, there was a fierce aura coming and going. They didn't seem to be good people. They were all extreme. This was the only property that the Chiba family had taken out this time, 9% of the shares of the Empire Hotel Casino. Even if it was just this one share, it was better than the countless pieces of land that the Huangchuan family had distributed. The Empire Hotel itself wasn't affiliated or allied. The Chiba family had only used this piece of good land as a stepping stone to buy 9% of the casino's shares with a huge amount of money. Moreover, other than the annual share, they had no other power. Just by looking at this, one could tell how huge the capital behind this was. In the shareholders' committee, other than a few people from the capital groups in Yokohama, the leading company in charge of operations and management was the world-famous Ancient Corporation. As a giant in the tourism industry, in addition to their own travel routes, Ancient Corporation also operated many luxury hotels and special travel facilities. It wasn't strange that they would be involved in all travel-related businesses. Back then, the Constellation was operated and managed by their family. Compared to such a big deal, this was just an inconspicuous subsidiary. Ancient Corporation had more than a dozen similar hotels and casinos in America, Rome, Egypt, the Russian Federation, and other places. The main shareholder behind such a huge company was the even more famous financial giant, Aeon Investment. The annual profit of these hotels was probably not as much as a few operators casually placing orders in the futures markets at various borders. The seemingly huge Aeon Group was just a subsidiary organization of the Continuation Court that raised funds from the outside. It wasn't even on the Astronomical Society's list of organizations, Behind the continuation court was the astronomical society that covered all the borders of the modern realm and even went deep into hell. When Huaishi's thoughts went up layer by layer and returned to the present from the perspective of the astronomical society, all the glory and brilliance of the extravagant scene in front of him seemed to dim in an instant. It was so small that it was no longer eye-catching. But around this 10% share, the extreme chaos of the entire inner circle of Donbua seemed to be boiling with excitement. They rubbed their hands together excitedly, even if they knew that they might not even have the chance to sit at the gambling table. Do you see it, Akasaki? Huaisha couldn't help but sigh. We're like ants. Akasaki turned around in confusion and looked at him, but found that he wasn't looking at her. His gaze was drifting around the noisy casino, but she didn't know where his focus was. Countless tiny ants gathered here. One was called Huaichi, another was called Akasaki, and countless others with various names. But no one cared. They fought desperately for the small sugar cubes falling from the sky, as if they could become a noble king as long as they had it, even if they lived in silence and lit walnuts. This is ridiculous. Huaisha laughed self-deprecatingly and walked to the bar counter. Shiranui, thank you. Oh, isn't this Huaichi? And Akasaki, you two fought so fiercely before, but now you can sit quietly together? How strange. Chiba Ruji walked out of the crowd, holding two beauties with different skin colors in his arms. He hugged them left and right, looking handsome and dissolute. He didn't seem to be reluctant to take out such a large property as a bet, and he was having more fun than anyone else. Are you also here to challenge Arazaki? He asked curiously. I don't dare. I'm just here to watch the fun. Akasaki replied respectfully. Haha, don't be so reserved. There are not so many rules in the casino. Chiba shook his head and laughed. Since I took it out as a bet, I have no reason to take it back. But you have to be careful. Arazaki is very powerful, huh? After saying that, he laughed and invited them enthusiastically. Let's go. I still have some empty seats. The gambling will start at 8 o'clock. We can play 2 rounds first. No. The two hurriedly refused. Chiba didn't insist. He just raised his hand and snapped his fingers. He said to the bartender behind the table, get someone to give them 2 million in chips. If they lose tonight, it's on me, yes. The bartender turned around and reported. Huaisha was about to refuse, but he saw Chiba waving his hand indifferently. Don't be so polite. It's just a little money. Didn't you help me a lot? Take it as a thank you gift. After saying that, he hummed a song and walked away with the girl in his arms. Not long after, 2 stacks of golden chips were sent to the two of them. In silence, the two of them looked at each other. Akasaki asked, by the way, are you very good at gambling? Huaisha thought for a long time and asked seriously, does cheating count when playing landlord? Of course not. Akasaki's whole person was not good. What are you thinking in your head? If you cheat here, your hand will be chopped off. I thought you had a lot of confidence, but you didn't prepare at all. You just want to play this casino? Maybe I'm lucky? Huaisha answered with a trembling voice and grabbed it. I'm the 3rd place of the 8th round of the turtle draw in our village. Why can't I be considered a gambling god? Tonight, I'll show you what it means to take a gamble and turn a bicycle into a motorcycle. Without waiting for Akasaki to react, he walked to the table. 20 minutes later. Sir? Mr. Huaisha? The dealer lowered his head and looked at the young man behind the table. Are you okay? It's your turn to show your cards. Huaisha lowered his head and looked at the last golden chip on the table. He raised his head and squeezed out a smile with difficulty. Well, let me ask first. He asked expectantly, do we have a rule of surrender and lose half? Chapter 749. Of course not. His trembling hand revealed the bottom card, and a pitiful 2 was reflected under the light. The last chip also said goodbye to Huaisha. Don't, Akaki, one more. Huaisha didn't care about Akaki's pull and struggled with all his might. I have prepared 10 million. Let me play one more round, and I will definitely be able to get back my capital. Akaki rolled his eyes and couldn't stand it anymore. Just now, when they saw how confident he was, They thought that he was possessed by Gao Jin from the Doomsday movies. However, they didn't expect him to be so bad when he played cards. In less than 20 minutes, he lost the last 100,000 yuan of their 4 million yuan. Even if you threw yourself into a puddle, it wouldn't be as fast as this. How did you do it? With your dog's heart and dog's face? You still want to compete with the gambling king invited by the Chiba family from America? In your dreams, if you could eat one more bean, you wouldn't be like this. You can already see the scene of the future Huaisha losing all her money and drooling as she started to go, "Abba, Abba, Abba." Ha ha. Did you see the horse farm? Ha ha. At the side, the figure who had been watching coldly finally couldn't stand it anymore. With a snort, he convulsed with laughter, and tears almost flowed out of his eyes. That guy. 5 Then, ha ha, he surrendered and lost half. Lost half. Ha ha. It's so funny. The extreme down nowadays is really colorful, haha. I thought that someone was going to challenge me, and I was shocked. Ha. Where did Mr. Chiba find such a talented person? Akaki frowned and looked back unhappily. Then he saw the woman who was leaning on the fierce bodyguard and couldn't straighten her back. Her black Ingzhou robe was faintly glowing. Her long hair was coiled up, and the cuffs and hem were covered with strange blooming peonies. She didn't have the usual sense of dignity and calmness. Instead, it made her smile more gorgeous and charming, with an indescribable temptation. She wiped the corner of her eyes, looked at the two people with a faint smile, and asked, "Let me guess, this is Mr. Akaki from the Jinchuan Association? And this must be the Lord Huai Jijun that Mr. Chiba said came specially to challenge me?" Huaisha was stunned and looked at her blankly. "Big sister, who are you?" Don't you know me? How strange." The woman laughed. "My name is Izaru Murin. I'm the person you came to challenge today. But you don't even know if I'm a man or a woman. You don't even do your homework. Are you looking down on me?" Chi was stunned, dumbfounded. He had never come to the Empire Hotel to gamble on horses before. He did not expect that the undefeated gambling king that the Chiba family had specially invited from America, the gambling king that made professional gamblers tremble in fear, was actually a woman. Moreover, she was so shockingly beautiful that he couldn't take his eyes off her. "If it's only at this level, you'll lose for sure, Huai Jijun." She looked at Huaisha mockingly. Huaisha's expression became calmer and calmer. He looked at her face carefully and suddenly laughed. "No, I think I'll win for sure." As he spoke, he stroked his hair and grinned happily. "In terms of appearance, you're no match for me, Miss Izaru." Izaru's expression froze, and she was stunned. For so many years, she had been willing to pay any price for winning or losing. Even if she was scorned as a bitch who only had victory in her eyes and was regarded as an evil spirit, she didn't care. It was just the groans of the weak and the barks of the defeated. In the end, she would always be the winner. But there had never been a person who dared to deny her appearance to her face and trampled on the beauty that she was proud of. And this person seemed to be reasonable. Her smile froze for a moment, and then she became indifferent. "Just being good-looking is useless in gambling, Lord Huai Jijun. I used to like your face a lot. Thank you for the compliment. I like it too." Huaisha shrugged. "It doesn't matter whether you win or lose. Being happy is the most important thing. Besides, winning or losing is only temporary, but beauty is permanent. By the way, I have a skincare trick here. Do you want to exchange it later?" In the silence, Izaru sneered. "When I win all your clothes and make you run out naked, I will consider your proposal." After that, she turned and left. But she heard Huaisha's voice behind her. "Ms. Izaru." Her footsteps paused slightly, and she looked back. But she saw Huaisha's solemn and serious expression, as if he was looking at the silly child next door leaning on the railing. He said to her seriously, "Strip mahjong is illegal." That's how the conversation died. With anger all over her body, Izaru flicked her sleeves and left. When Huaisha looked back, he found that Akasaki was standing far away. "What's wrong?" he asked curiously. "Nothing. I just don't want others to think that the person running naked is familiar with me." Akasaki reminded him seriously. "Why sure, there is still some time before the game starts. If you run now, It's not too late. Huh? Huaisher shook his head disdainfully and sneered. Do I look like someone who is afraid of running naked? That's how the conversation died again. Until the game started, Akasaki didn't talk to him again. Instead, she was thinking about when to hit this bastard with a stick and how to beat him after putting a sack on him. In this way, as time gradually passed, the casino became more and more noisy. Until 8 o'clock sharp, on the center stage, the drunk Chiba leaned on two different women and raised a microphone. Aya, is everyone here? He was beaming with joy. You all look quite energetic. So, let's cut the chatter. Is everyone ready? The sound of cheering was like a tide. Only Huaisher, a newbie, finally felt that something was wrong. Then, the game to decide the ownership of the shares of this casino is about to begin. Chiba Ruji raised a finger. The rules are simple. After 12 o'clock, the shares will belong to whoever wins more money. Let's cut the chatter and begin. He was not as long-winded and cumbersome as Sheng Tianmu. He was even more impatient than the people below the stage. Qianyi Ruji raised his head and drank all the liquor in his glass. Then he spread his arms. Amidst the enthusiastic cheers, the melodious piano and jazz music started playing again. Meanwhile, the naked dancers walked onto the stage in groups. The waiters who had been waiting by the side with trays for a long time quickly entered the venue and distributed the chips in their hands to each gambler. Everyone who came here today was allowed to enter the venue, regardless of the identity of the person. If they were found to have cheated, they would be disqualified on the spot. The casino would provide each person with 5 million yuan of special chips, which were only used for this game and could not be exchanged. They would only be used for planning after the game. However, the casino did not prohibit the two parties from raising the stakes during the game, but the final tally would not admit the amount. Gambling wasn't just limited to poker, bridge, and Texas Hold'em. It included dice, mahjong, pai gow, dog fighting, boxing, horse racing, and so on. In this place, anything that could be used to gamble could be found everywhere. You could even catch someone to draw a turtle or bet on the gender of the next person who passed by the door, as long as someone was willing to play with you. Huaisher began to tremble under the malicious gazes from all directions. What should I do if I am targeted by the big shots as soon as I enter the group? I feel like someone needs help. Every time Huaisher needed help the most, a cheerful voice would ring out in his head. Tongyi's figure appeared from the darkness and whistled with a cheerful smile. You have a way? Huaisher was overjoyed. Seriously, do you need to take some time to change your bad habit of running forward when your brain is hot? Tongyi sighed. You only remembered that you don't know how to play cards when you arrived at the casino. Is your reflexes a little too long? It's too late to react. I can't just pat my butt and run away now, right? So, you need a little help, a little valuable advice, right? The illusionary figure raised her hand and put it on his shoulder. Her smile became more and more cheerful. She raised her hand and rubbed her fingers. It's just that recently, I am a little short of money. Since it's my idea, do you want to share half of the money with me? Oh, woman. Huaisher sneered. What are you thinking about? If you don't mind letting the people in the inner circle of Dambwa appreciate but I don't mind. Tongyi blinked and said pitifully, if you don't agree, I will leave. By the way, I will prepare the camera in advance. Recently, everyone in the Paradise Prince Club has no food, so they are hungry and thirsty. Presumably, such a fierce material must be able to cheat a lot of money from the little girls, right? And I could divide it into many parts. Starting from the first close, as long as I show it again and again, the little girls will buy it again and again. Finally, it will be widely spread, and everyone will have a copy. Maybe you will have another title called the Astronomy Club symbol, but Huaisher's movement stiffened, and he squeezed out a voice from between his teeth. 73, no more. N? What did you just say? Tongyi didn't seem to hear it. Too much. Huaisher was furious, but when he saw Tongyi turn around and was about to leave, he quickly widened his eyes. 64. 6 or 4 will do, right? The wind is too strong. I can't hear it clearly. 5. Huaisher raised his hands, lowered his head in grief and indignation, and then quickly raised it up angrily. If you dare to continue to say 64, then I might as well run naked. How is that possible? I'm not such a heartless person. Tangi forced herself to swallow the words she hadn't said yet, and secretly wiped away her cold sweat. She felt that she wouldn't be able to continue the happy routine after a while. This strange sense of danger was really a bit exciting. Okay, where is your method? Huaisher looked at the air in front of him with resentment, and his empty eyes made the others feel a bit scared. Are you stupid? Tangi sighed, bent down, and reminded him one last time in his ear, you don't know how to play cards, but don't others know how to play cards? With a snap of her fingers, the Book of Destiny suddenly opened. An old figure that Huaisher had long forgotten slowly appeared, and grinned at Huaisher, looking very wretched and gloomy. Who is this? Huaisher looked for a long time, but didn't react. Chapter 750. Chi Wan, from Dongxia, was a famous entrepreneur in Xianhai, a border trader. He had a car and a house, but both his parents had passed away. Unfortunately, on the day before he reached the peak of his life, he died in a car accident. He was 51 years old. It had to be said that even though people died in different ways, those who succeeded all had the same reason. Long before he became the Yin family's white glove, he had already stepped into the social elite and was recruited by the Yin family with a large amount of money. In the rise of the Yin family, his contribution was huge. If he was not important, people would not have been so angry when he established his own family. If one had to describe his characteristics, it would be that he was a natural businessman. His precise intuition in investment and innate sensitivity to numbers, as well as his ability to control the cost of the industry, made him a popular professional manager as early as 20 years ago. At the top of his resume was a double degree in economics and mathematics from the Ivy League in America within 4 years. After he started working, he also obtained a master's degree in statistics. What he specialized in was probability. This person was a natural gambler. Even though he focused on a bigger field, he never looked down on the gambling in casinos. Gambling is never a game with suspense. Those who rely on gambling to get rich overnight are like relying on drugs to get happiness. Every one of them has a problem with their brains. Facing Huaisher's question, Chi Wen's record did not hide his disdain. No matter the rules, in the end, it's just a trick for the banker to win. Huaisher was stunned. This was the first time he had seen the demeanor of a master from this guy. After saying so much, do you know how to do it or not? Huh, it's just a simple math problem. Chi Wen's record smiled condescendingly. Using Huaisher's eyes, he scanned the people who surrounded him. Even though it's not professional, the opponents are brainless enough to join the mafia. I don't think there will be a problem winning. After the first anniversary of his death anniversary, Chi Wen actually showed off once again in a way that he hadn't done before. The ups and downs of life were really unpredictable. Move aside, let the professionals do it. Leader Huaiji, do you want a round? When those people invited him with bad intentions, Huaisher slowly raised his head. Not far away, Akasaki, who wanted to stop them, paused and raised her eyebrows in confusion. It was as if he had become a completely different person. Instead of the usual sun-like radiance, it was more like a wriggling mass of darkness, making it hard for one to fathom its true nature. One could only feel a lingering yin qi, but soon that feeling dissipated like an illusion. The corners of Huaisher's mouth twitched as if he hadn't smiled for a long time, but his smile was so harmless and honest, making people feel at ease. He was like a fat sheep that had delivered itself to his doorstep. Sure, he said. What do you want to play? The others exchanged glances and suggested. I saw that Mr. Huai Jijun was very good at playing in Texas. Why don't we play a few rounds? Sure. The paper effigy in his arms readily accepted his advice. Thus, everyone smiled. They all seemed to have a bright future. To be honest, this feeling was particularly wonderful. Huaisher himself was still Huaisher, and there was no change. But at that moment, countless records squeezed into his mind and formed a different personality outside his soul. It was like a computer with a virtual machine. A lot of numbers, laws, and messy calculations that Huai sure couldn't understand turned around in his mind. The changes of characters and the jumps of numbers had a strange and trap-like atmosphere. It was like a spider weaving its own web. Every time he thought, there would be two thoughts. One was his own, and the other was the conclusion made by the record, named Chi-Wen. He didn't even look at the hidden cards. When he looked down at his first exposed card, two thoughts emerged in his mind. The first was, what is this? The second was, don't look, call. Why? Chi-Wen, no, call. That's it. In an instant, Huaisher was full of confidence and grabbed the chips. I call. That overflowing confidence stunned the others. After a moment of contemplation, they all made the choice to call or not. The second exposed card was dealt, and Huaisher's card was the biggest. Chi-Wen, raise 100,000, don't panic. Huaisher grinned and threw out another chip. His smile was maintained until the moment the cards were revealed. 8, J, 7, K. The bottom card was 3. There wasn't even a pair, and 500,000 US dollars evaporated in an instant. Fortunately, Huaisher didn't hot-headedly raise the stakes just now. Otherwise, he would have lost 1/10 of his money in this round. What the hell? Huaisher was dumbfounded. Chi-Wen, what the F***CK are you doing? However, when he saw those smiling faces through Huaisher's eyes, Chi-Wen felt a heartfelt joy in his personality, as if he was the one who had won. Don't be impatient. He chuckled strangely. If the pig isn't fattened up, how can it be killed? Then, he continued to instruct. After this round of cards is dealt, call first. No matter how good the cards are, no matter how much the others raise, don't call later. Then, in the second round, of course, he lost another 100,000. It was a pity that he lost 3 of his cards. It's the third round. Huaisher held on to his bottom card and started to panic. Do I have to raise a pig? If I do, I'll become a pig. Don't panic. You can be more stable in the third round, Chi-Wen said. Some people have already lost so badly that they'll start to be more cautious in this round. I don't think anyone will double the bet again. It doesn't matter whether they win or lose. Combined with Huaisher's previous performance, no one would think that Huaisher was a threat anymore. No one would care if he made a small profit at this time. It was a pity that Huaisher was unlucky this round and gave up midway. 200,000. In less than half an hour, 800,000 had evaporated. Everyone was pissed. When all the decisions were handed over to Chi-Wen, Huaisher realized from a bystander's point of view that the atmosphere at the table had unknowingly become lively. When the chips were not exchanged with money, everyone seemed to instantly become incomparably generous when they squandered. Even if they lost, they would no longer feel heartache. Everyone had a smile on their faces, as if they were immersed in an illusion. When their eyes were illuminated by the golden chips, it was as if they had received happiness. It was a bone-chilling happiness. In the fifth round, Huaisher brazenly raised the stakes. It seemed that he had already gotten carried away. This time, luck seemed to have finally favored him. He actually relied on a sloppy and ordinary straight to win too. 2 million. Not only did he make up for his previous losses, but he also earned one. 6 million. I knew it, Gao Jing. Do you know what Gao Jing is? Huaisher laughed proudly. In the eyes of others, it was pure dog-shit luck. The two people who had been frightened by Huaisher's momentum and chose to fold unhappily clicked their tongues. Beggars also needed to celebrate the new year, so they didn't care. In the sixth round, he still won 1 million. In the seventh round, Huaisher's good luck finally came to an end. He lost 1 for million. At this time, someone had already lost all his chips and left the table. But soon, another gambler who had just returned from playing blackjack sat up next to him. The gambling continued. Huaisher's luck was sometimes good and sometimes bad. He often lost in exasperation, but the chips in front of him increased at a completely unreasonable speed. After more than an hour, when everyone reacted, Huaisher's smile was already illuminated by the golden light. This round, I will raise the stakes. Everyone, do as you wish, do as you wish. He waved his hand and doubled the stakes. As the gambling ushered in the final stage of the river card, the stakes also increased from the previous player's 6 million, which was originally enough to make people's blood pressure soar, to 12 million. With a smile, Huaisher turned his head and looked at his next player. Master has raised the stakes. What about you, Yukong? The skinny man's expression changed, and the sweat on his face seeped out drop by drop. But under Huaishi's provocative gaze, he finally couldn't help but grit his teeth. I'll go all in. Just like that. He gambled all of his chips on this one bet. He gasped for breath, glared at Huaishi, and sneered, I don't believe that you can kill me with a set of 4 cards in my hands. Huaishi smiled mysteriously and didn't answer. He just tapped the cards in his hand. He silently calculated the chips he was about to harvest after this round. Finally, in the opening stage, he turned over the cards in his hand one by one. A 9 of spades, a 10 of spades. In addition, there were 3 cards that were picked out. 7, 8J. The dazzling poker cards illuminated the pale faces one after another. Sorry, straight flush. Huaishi turned his head and politely said goodbye to the next player next to him. There are still people waiting. You can give up your seat. Thank you. Just like that, under the dealer's manipulation, he could only watch helplessly as he bid farewell to all his chips. The man froze in place and subconsciously wanted to get angry and beat someone. But after seeing Huaishi's eyes, he instantly calmed down and sweated profusely. Don't be like this, Mr. Huaishi. Give me a chance. Give me a chance. He begged in a low voice. Can you lend me 300? No, just 2 million. Huaishi raised his finger indifferently, flicked away the man's hands that grabbed his sleeves, and patted the non-existent dust, but he didn't refuse. He just asked softly, Why should I lend you money? The man was stunned for a moment, and then he was overjoyed. I still have a restaurant in Fujian. I can sign an IOU. I could transfer. Huaishi's action paused for a moment, and his eyes became more and more disdainful. He could have borrowed it, but inexplicable anger made him unbearable. These chips can't be exchanged for money. Do you understand? Do you want to win the casino's shares with your level? Why don't you go home, wash up, and sleep early? I know. The man's face was gray, but before, when I lost all my chips, I'd already lost all the shops in our group. If I don't pay it back before 12 o'clock, he stammered, and his eyes were full of hope. 2 million, Mr. Huaishi. 2 million is enough. I can win it back. Huaishi closed his eyes and didn't want to look at him again. He grabbed a handful of chips, threw them at his face, and pointed to Okazaki sitting in the bar not far away. Write an IOU and give it to him. Get out. Thank you, Mr. Huaishi. Thank you, Mr. Huaishi. The man was overjoyed, and his eyes lit up with hope and happiness again. After picking up the chips on the ground, he happily went to the bar and wrote an IOU. Finally, he rushed into the baccarat area without looking back. He disappeared. Huaishi raised his head, looked at the face in front of him that had changed, and showed a harmless smile again. Shall we continue? So, the gambling continued, and so did the happiness. Chapter 751. Late at night, Kyoto National University, a luxurious hotel. In the innermost area of the Ivory Tower's exchange team's residence, there was a luxurious independent suite. It was isolated by layers of laws, preventing all prying eyes. Under the dim light, the conversation had been going on for a long time. Professor Miyamoto's mental state is still unstable. Isaac rubbed his sore eyebrows and reported to the university council on the other side. A few days ago, I informed the Ingzhou branch of the administration, but they kept quiet and didn't give a formal response. They only said that they don't want to be involved in the battle between the Kung family and the Wu family. They also hope that we can maintain our position and not let the situation become too chaotic. In the air, Russell's projection nodded slowly. You've been in Ingzhou, so you might not have received the notice. In order to prepare for the War of the Worlds in 2 to 3 years, the administration and the P5 will hold a temporary special meeting in a week. Before the meeting begins, no one knows what the final outcome will be. Under such circumstances, it's not surprising that the Ingzhou branch would make a conservative decision. He paused for a moment and continued. As for Professor Miyamoto, you don't need to worry. As far as I know, Nakajima Kuchi, who works in the Continuation Institute, has already negotiated with the decision-making room. Miyamoto is a student that he trained, so he can't just leave her alone. Hearing this, Isaac's expression became much more relaxed. Since the creator, Nakajima Kuchi, was here, Miyamoto Jinichiro's safety could at least be guaranteed. No matter how bad the situation was, with him around, Miyamoto didn't need to worry about her life. There wouldn't even be a formal trial. The existence of every scholar was precious to the present realm, let alone a geneticist like Miyamoto who could guarantee the continuation of the race. If necessary, the Continuation Institute would use this as a reason to take him to the headquarters and keep him there forever to extend his research life and continue to contribute to the present realm. But if that's all, it won't help the situation at all. The existence of the Divine City in the future has made the entire Donbua inner circle too unstable. The vice president said with a serious expression. Before this, the president of Kyoto University privately expressed to me that he was worried that this would be a repeat of the Farbach incident. Don't worry, Isaac. Luo Su replied confidently. Isn't our ace teacher, Huaishur, the classical music teacher, already in charge of handling it? The vice principal's expression became even more serious. Forgive me for being blunt, but this is irresponsible to Huaishur's life and also irresponsible to the Donbua inner circle. Principal, you should have a more reliable candidate. Russell couldn't help but laugh. Don't be so rigid all the time, Isaac. You have to have more confidence in my secretary. Well, although he does like to mess around sometimes, hasn't there been any major problems so far? Maybe a miracle will happen then. Miracles are nothing more than the occasional occurrence of survivor bias. Isaac retorted indifferently. Mr. Principal, scholars only believe in laws. Sigh. That's why you haven't been able to break through to the creator realm. Isaac, if you hold such a view, the more you learn, the more your understanding will be restricted by your predecessors. No matter how many degrees you have, they're just shackles to you. I think we have argued about this issue many times, Isaac replied coldly. I don't think there will be any results this time. Okay. You always make sense. I can't win against you, okay? Russell shook his head and sighed. After thinking for a moment, he replied seriously, I know what you want to say, but unfortunately, before the dust settles, the ivory tower can't easily state its position. So, if you really can't stand it anymore, give him a little help. How about it? Isaac frowned and wanted to say something, but Russell waved his hand and interrupted him. Just treat this as a mission from the principal, my dear vice principal. How about you try to get along harmoniously with your colleagues? At least try to be tolerant of my secretary. Otherwise, if word gets out, I, as the principal, will be very embarrassed. After a long silence, Isaac finally replied, I know. If necessary, I will. Isn't that great? Everyone can get along harmoniously and have a bright future. Russell clapped his hands and beamed. When he was about to say something, he saw Isaac's expression stagnate, and his eyes suddenly looked into the distance. What's wrong? Just now, the time sequence rippled again. I'm afraid the beacon will be triggered again. Isaac frowned. The 19th time. In celestial genealogy, the divine Marrow Road stigmata was probably the most deeply integrated with the present realm. All the stigmata revolved around the present realm. As the fifth level of the divine Marrow Road, the legendary incarnation of the god of time Kronos on the ground, Isaac was keenly aware of the change that affected the whole capital at that moment. On the time axis of nothingness, the 19th abnormal branch point appeared. I'm afraid it's an illegal time jump again, he said. Really desperate. After a long silence, Russell sighed. That Farbach soul probably doesn't want to see the past repeat itself, right? To make a former hero sacrifice himself to this extent. Today's directorate is getting more and more outrageous. No matter how bureaucratic it is, there should be a limit. You know the inside story? Isaac asked. Yes, after all, the meeting between the decision room and Green Sun's top management was facilitated by me. They really lost a lot of face for me. Russell shrugged. The situation at that time was even worse than it is now. The friction between the Astronomical Society and Green Sun was constant and almost out of control. Fortunately, in the end, although everyone was very reluctant, in order to avoid the outbreak of a full-scale conflict and maintain the stability of the present realm and the border, They gritted their teeth and signed the contract. After all, there's only one present realm. If it is broken, everyone will be finished. I remember that at that time, it was the young man who stood up and represented Green Sun's sincerity for the present realm and took the initiative to go to the directorate. After all, he was a rare Bifrost resonance physique. Whether it was his ability or identity, it was enough to attract the attention of the decision room. Therefore, he was once praised as a symbol of peace. Oh, you didn't see how incompetent and furious Perron was at that time. I don't know if it was because he couldn't bear to see his adopted son make such a big sacrifice for the false peace, or because the child he raised chose to go to the directorate. The scene at that time was really quite exciting. Isaac was stunned for a long time and asked puzzledly, "But even so, I'm afraid it won't be trusted, right?" "Who said it won't?" "It won't please either side." Russell sighed with pity. "The directorate will be wary that you are a spy of Green Sun, and Green Sun will treat you as a traitor who defected to the Astronomical Society, and you are destined to only walk the path of a tool until you die. In this situation, no one is happy. In that case, you still tried your best to fight for the mixed race, and even facilitated an official meeting between the leader of the mixed race refugees at the border and the American officials. It can only be said that it was not easy. In the end, you were involved with the element of destruction." "You mean the Farbach incident?" "Yes, after all, it was the most tragic loss of the American genealogy in the past 50 years. It was also the time when the whole of America was the closest to hell, the most dangerous time, and only one step away from the deep transformation of America. Since then, no genealogy in the earth was willing to protect people with beast characteristics." At this point, Russell raised his hand, rubbed his old face, and sighed with melancholy. "Okay, let's not talk about these sad old things. How about we talk about something hopeful now? For example, our ace teacher, Mr. Huaisher, who is saving the Domboy inner circle. How is his progress now?" When he said this, the old man's eyes were full of expectation. Isaac's expression, on the other hand, became indescribable. "What's wrong?" Russell couldn't wait and urged, "Haven't you always been in charge of the dragon summoning flute? Don't keep me in suspense. Let me see his progress." In the long silence, the vice principal raised his hand expressionlessly. Between his 5 fingers, the projection of the dragon summoning flute unfolded. The world's largest abyssal mirror silently changed its direction and slowly rotated from the border. It entered the parameters, adjusted the coordinates, and aimed at the earth. Then, in an instant, it quickly locked onto a certain teacher in the ivory tower. Just like this, the image was enlarged again and again. Before a clear image appeared, a clamor sounded from the other side like a tsunami. It was as if countless people were roaring and shouting excitedly. And just as the gamblers were watching, a handsome face slowly emerged from the image with an excited smile. He pushed all the chips to the center of the gambling table with both hands. He had actually staked everything he had in one go. Soon, as his fingers turned, his trump card was revealed. It was the same combination as the community card, completely pushing the frenzied atmosphere to the climax. 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. A straight flush. In an instant, in the midst of those selfless shouts, who knew how many faces on the gambling table lost their color and turned pale, they could hear the wails of despair in the depths of their hearts. With just this set of cards, the winner of as much as $300 million was decided. It was a peak that would be difficult to replicate tonight. In an instant, the atmosphere of the entire casino seemed to be ignited. It was as if a well-deserved king had descended on this land. Under the respectful gazes, the young man's face seemed to be plated with a layer of bright golden light. That was the appearance of the rising new god of gamblers. But the room was dead silent. In the long silence, Russell scratched his head and was puzzled. "Who is this?" Isaac replied expressionlessly. "Huai Jijin." "What's he doing?" "Playing cards." So Russell asked blankly, "What about our ace teacher, Huaisher?" "He's saving the inner circle of Dambois." Chapter 752. Now, in the casino, Under the vigilant and cautious gazes of many gamblers at the same table, Huaishur held the cards in his hand, raised his eyes disdainfully, and looked at his opponent, the flower arrangement on the bar counter behind him. "Brother, what cards does he have in his hand? Why are you panicking? It's just 2 jacks." The bouquet of plum blossoms that the flower master painstakingly made every day swayed twice excitedly. "A diamond and a heart. I can't beat you in seconds." Beat him, beat him." "Thanks, brother. I'll water you later." "You're welcome." Huaishur retracted his gaze and smiled evilly. He raised his hand and threw out 2 crystal chips. "I'll raise 20 million." In the suffocating atmosphere, someone finally couldn't stand the huge pressure and stood up. "I fold." Ignoring the chips he had bet on the table, he took his little capital and fled in a sorry state. "That's it." Amidst the sound of gasps, the god of gamblers, Huaishur, looked around and smiled disdainfully. How terrifying! The surrounding gazes became more and more respectful and fearful, but unfortunately, they didn't have the guts to shout, "This guy must not be left alive." This was probably the most common saying of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger in Doomsday. In order to numb his opponent, he actually didn't hesitate to lose 4 million before the game started. Everyone was deceived by his harmless appearance, but they didn't expect that it was all an act. He was scheming and scheming like the sea, as expected of the Huaishur group that rose from the inner circle in just half a month. It was really terrifying. "So I won again." Huaishur lowered his head and looked at the chips in front of him that were about to drown him. It was unbelievable. In fact, until now, this fool still hadn't figured out the rules of 5-card stud, Texas, and blackjack. He had to rely on Chi Wen's reminders and instructions, as well as the help of the stigmata. Otherwise, not to mention playing cards, he would have lost the game long ago. Until now, Huaishur still didn't understand what was going on. He didn't know why he won, and then he won repeatedly. Occasionally, he lost a little, but he immediately won back twice as much. Was it so good to reap without sowing? Huaishur himself was stunned. But even though he knew that these chips were just tokens for a short night and couldn't be exchanged for anything, he was still so excited that his face turned red. He couldn't wait to wave the chips and shout for more. Looking at the group of idiots around them, they didn't know how to use their brains at all. Winning was simply too important. Luck was on my side. I can win again. I can win until the end. Only I am the ruler of this place. Huaishur's face flushed with excitement as a strong sense of confidence and impulse surged in his mind. He feverishly stroked the small mountain of chips in front of him. But when he thought that he would have to give half of the money he earned to the black-hearted woman, his heart suddenly ached. Wait, why will my heart hurt? What's the difference between this unredeemable code and plastic? Huaishur was instantly alerted by the warning from the Book of Destiny. His smile froze on his face as he stood there in a daze. What was going on? Hurry up and start. Hey, hurry up. Are you stupid? Huaishur, get out of the way if you don't want to play. Don't make people wait too long. The gamblers who squeezed over and sat down couldn't wait to urge him. They glared at the dazed man. Even the dealer looked over in confusion. Mr. Huaishur, can we start? In the silence, Huaishur raised his head and looked at the faces that were filled with fanaticism and excitement. After a long time, he forced a smile. Sorry, I'm a little uncomfortable. Let's play first. He got up and didn't even want to look at the large amount of chips that he had just received. He turned around and left. In this casino that had become stuffy at some point, everyone's face seemed to have an illusory smile. The air was filled with greed that almost condensed in its substance, silently boiling and enveloping everything. Even if more and more people were being eliminated and losing everything, even if they didn't hesitate to bet their own businesses in exchange for useless chips for those illusory shares, the stakes also began to grow larger and larger. Even if they lost all their chips, they still stood by the gambling table and watched in anticipation. Some people were extremely regretful. They felt that they were just a little bit away from success, but they were just unlucky. And some people's faces were ashen, like walking corpses. They turned a blind eye to the luxurious service provided by the casino for free. They sat on the sofa in a daze with no focus in their eyes. They were like walking corpses. Huaishi's movements paused for a moment. At the window, he suddenly turned his head and saw a swaying figure silently passing by in the night outside the window. The pale face reflected the night in neon lights. Soon, it disappeared again. There were only pools of blood that were quickly washed clean on the street. On the street, whether it was shoppers with smiles on their faces, passers-by in a hurry, or even merchants with warm smiles, they all bypassed the blood under their feet and turned a blind eye. They had long been accustomed to it. The death of a few people didn't even cause a ripple. They were already swallowed by the shining neon lights and covered in darkness. It was like walking into a modern meat processing workshop. They disappeared without a trace in the slaughter, without seeing the blood. Even the pain was only for a moment, then everything was over. When Huaishi turned his head again, he saw the scene in the corner. Amidst the bustling atmosphere, a waiter walked over to an abandoned loser and handed him a letter. That person trembled as he held the paper. After a long time, he nodded with difficulty. After returning the letter, he raised his hand and ordered a glass of whiskey. He tilted his head back and downed it in one gulp. Then he stood up numbly and walked towards a rooftop. Not long after, the falling shadow once again passed by outside the window. A muffled sound could be heard from the ground far away. Mr. Huaishi. At some point, serene appeared in front of him. Her smile was as beautiful as a peony. Mr. Huaishi, Lady Chiba invites you over. After a long time, Huaishi retracted his gaze from outside the window. Lead the way. Please follow me. Serene glanced at him with a smile that wasn't a smile, then turned around and walked forward. They passed through the lively casino and headed towards a secluded viewing room upstairs. Under the cover of the hidden origin substance, the casino's atmosphere was as heated as ever. The ship of greed continued to sail across the abyss. From beginning to end, Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 had an intoxicated smile on his face. He leaned against the warm, fragrant jade and quietly watched everything unfold. His eyes, which were immersed in alcohol and beauty, were completely unmoved. Even if some of his loyal subordinates were among them, after a long time, the hunchbacked butler leaned over and whispered into his ear, "Master, the people on the chairman's list have all been taken care of." Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 turned around and glanced at him. After a long time, he nodded slightly. "When our people are buried, send some flowers on my behalf. Even though they betrayed us, we still have to give them some face." "Then what about the bed?" the butler asked. "Isn't everyone having fun?" Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 waved his hand casually. "Continue." "Yes." The butler supported himself with his walking stick and silently retreated. "Also, everyone else can leave as well." He stood up and put on his pants. He patted the butt next to him and smiled. "We'll continue playing later." After watching the girls leave the room, he walked over to the wine cabinet and asked, "Do you want something to drink? Please give me the innermost bottle of Yamazaki, the most expensive one." Serene, who had just entered, glanced at the innermost part of the cabinet. "I saw it. Where's Haiki-kun?" "I'm fine with anything," Huaishi replied. "What do you mean by fine with anything?" Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 scratched his head in frustration. "You're always giving me problems. Haiki-kun. You're also a Yamazaki, right? This is a 50-year-old good wine." He picked up the bottle and walked over, sitting across from them. He gestured for them to make themselves at home and poured himself half a glass after adding ice. Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 couldn't help but sigh when he saw Huaishi's appearance. "You don't know how to play cards. If I had known earlier, I would have thought of a way to get rid of you sooner. Haiki-kun, you almost ruined our alliance." "I have to say, I don't know anything about this." Huaishi raised his head and looked outside the one-way glass. He saw those dazed faces in the boiling casino. "They're all traitors. There's no need to care about them." Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 said nonchalantly, "That old man, Shang Tianmu, is too good at ordering people around. He always gives me some tricky jobs. Although saying this may make you very sad, but Lord Huai Jijun, the purpose of tonight's bet is not as simple as you think." At this point, how could Huaishi not understand that this gamble was a way for the Alliance to get rid of the root of the problem? At this juncture, We can't be too rough, and we can't shake the foundation of the alliance. However, there's still many traitors. Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 sighed softly. This is the only way. Tonight's Empire Casino was the guillotine for traitors. They used the shares of the casino to lure everyone into it. Then, they used other methods to guide the traitors on the list to put a noose on themselves. They used the gambling method to legitimately take back the Alliance's assets. In the end, after losing everything, there was only one outcome for those who owed a huge debt and had nowhere to go. On the rooftop. Let me reintroduce you. Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 looked at Izuru beside him. This is Ms. Izuru Mullion, a cleaning expert from the graveyard of the Returnless, Ship of Greed. Tonight's bet was also her doing. She played a big part in making it so successful. You're too kind. Thousand Leaves Dragon 2. Izuru Mullion smiled and said, what a pity. I want to see Haiki-kun run naked. Even she didn't expect that the originally stable plan would almost fail. Everything developed as expected. The only exception was the dumbfounded Huaishur in front of her. So you're all playing me. Huaishur finally reacted. It wasn't supposed to be like this. Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 looked at Huaishur with a faint smile. I've already tested you. I even asked Azara to check on you. In the end, I found out that you don't know anything. Who would have thought that you were hiding something? I'm sorry, Huaishur. I'm afraid I can't let you continue. I can't give you all the benefits. Thousand Leaves Dragon 2 didn't hide anything. I've already decided to give the shares of the casino to the Luaha family. The winner of this bet has already been arranged. Huaishur was dumbfounded. So, the winner had already been blackmailed before the bet even started? Then, didn't I come for nothing? Chapter 753. After a short silence, Chiba Ruji didn't reply. He looked to the side and said, Miss Izaki, I'll leave the outside to you. It'll be foolproof. Izaki didn't mind him sending her away and left calmly. She didn't forget to take the bottle of Yamazaki on the table. After the door was closed, only Chiba and Huaishur were left in the quiet, luxurious private room. Speaking of which, we haven't had such an intimate conversation before, Mr. Huaishur. Chiba Ruji took out another bottle of good wine and poured a glass for Huaishur. He sighed and said, I originally wanted to recruit you under my command. I thought we would have a lot in common. I didn't expect that old man Sheng Tianmu would be one step ahead of me. Huaishur frowned in confusion. He didn't understand what he meant. Chiba Ruji raised his glass and made a toast. He raised his head and drank it in one gulp. He raised his sleeve to wipe the wine on his beard and said straightforwardly, I admire you very much. Even now, I still admire you very much because you're different from others. Mr. Chiba, you flatter me. Huaishur replied. If you want to recruit me, then forget it. I don't have any intention of changing my allegiance for the time being. Haha, not at all. I don't like to take away someone's favorite. This kind of thing is like a relationship between a man and a woman. It's only right for both parties to be willing. Besides, I don't have a daughter as beautiful as Lihua. Chiba laughed and stood up. He gestured for Huaishur to follow him. She walked to the window and pointed at the dazzling neon lights below. He looked down from the highest place in the inner circle of Donbua. Do you see it, Mr. Huaishur? This is the Empire Hotel. That's the property of the Luaha family. That's the trading company of the Sheng Tianmu family. Well, there's also the Jingtong Electronics that belongs to you. And that should be the Huaishur group, right? From here to there, this is the inner circle of Donbua. He turned his finger and pointed at other places. I have a clothing factory here. This is an investment company. Below the Empire Hotel, I have 6 shops in the busiest place in the inner circle of Donbua. By the way, aren't you running a fresh market recently? I also have a seafood company at the docks. Qin Yu longer rambled on, as if he was showing off his billions of assets. In the end, he said, you can choose any of these as my compensation to you. Huaishur was stunned, unable to understand. I didn't win the bet. In fact, if this was the Alliance's decision, I could only follow. Why make it up to me? He said, I don't think it's necessary. If you want to talk about it, how about we treat it as funding? Thousand Leaves Ruji shook his head and smiled, sipping the wine in his cup. What you told Akaki is already spread in the alliance. To be honest, Huaisher, I envy you very much. He said softly, very, very envious of you. No, it's not an exaggeration to say that I'm jealous, right? To me, the current you is already shining to the point of being an eyesore. If possible, I really want you to disappear from the inner circle of the pill wave. In a reflection of the glass, the smile in Qian Yilong, Er's eyes gradually disappeared. He was so calm that it made one's hair stand on end. Perhaps this was Qian Yilong, Er's true personality. When he broke free from the intoxication of alcohol and beauty, he became the ruler of the inner circle of the pill wave. He saved the former Qian Yi family from the brink of destruction and became an extreme dominator with his own strength. However, Huaisher was still calm. He stood in front of the window and looked down at the night sky. When he turned around, his expression became confused. I don't remember breaking any taboo, Mr. Qian. He asked curiously. Do you need me to apologize? Kneel down and take a seat? Qian Yilong asked back. If I say yes, will you? I will, Huaisher replied, without hesitation. However, Qian Yu was amused and slowly shook his head. Huaisher, you're also a hypocrite. There's no need for that kind of superficial ceremony. I have no reason to get rid of you. He raised his hand and patted the shoulder of the young man in front of him. I know your ambition, and I also understand your purpose. I know that if I let you grow, the alliance's rule over the inner circle of the pill wave will be shaken in the future. But actually, it doesn't matter. I don't care. To be exact, whether it's Sheng Tianmu or I, we don't think you can succeed. Qian Yilong told him, because we've all tried the same thing as you. Huaisher was stunned on the spot. Do you know? I'm already 41 years old this year. I'm middle-aged, but sometimes my back hurts after sleeping with a woman. When I wake up in the middle of the night to pee too many times, I miss the past. I miss the physique and achievements when I was young. I envy those young, bright, and sparkling things. Qian Yilong shook the ice in his cup and sneered. No matter how stupid I was when I was young, no matter how unbearable the past was, when I think about it now, it's actually full of so-called hope. He said, at that time, we were just like you now. Old man Sheng Tianmu once tried hard, but he was as miserable as a dog because of it. His face was covered in dirt, but he still failed in the end. I was a little smarter and chose to give up early. In the end, I did my best to maintain the continuation of the Chiba family. He laughed self-deprecatingly and looked at Huaisher. Water, food, medical treatment, and education. What you've done is much more realistic than what I did back then. But from the beginning to the end, you've neglected a problem. Qian Yilong stared into Huaisher's eyes and asked softly, you want to make them better, but are they really willing? Huaisher shook his head and answered without hesitation. Would anyone want to live in hell? Qian Yi laughed. Then go downstairs to the hall and ask those beautiful girls. Tell them not to be prostitutes anymore. There's a stable job with a monthly salary of 50,000 yen for them. Do you think they'll scoff at that? Go and tell your younger brother not to be an extreme anymore. We can start over. But how can there be so many opportunities in life to start over? A missed opportunity is a missed opportunity. How can those who are used to theft, fraud, betrayal, and violence return to normal order? When they're in their 40s or 50s, they'll feel old and realize that they've accomplished nothing. They'll be afraid, regret, and cry bitterly. But other than the sweatshop, where else can take them in? The workers in the convenience store will despise your tattoos and your identity as a mixed race. When that time comes, other than this only hell that will accept you, where else can you go? There will always be people who think that as long as there's a chance, this world can become very good. However, this world is never short of opportunities, isn't it? Then why is it still so bad? While Huaisher was silent, Qian Yilong told him calmly, Huaisher, even if you can give them countless chances, you can't stop people who are willing to degrade themselves. Even if it's a short change, their nature will be revealed soon. When people get used to living in a place without light, they can no longer leave the darkness. Did you know? Before you, there was someone who worked as hard as you and was filled with hope, Qian Yilong said, "That person's name is the future of God City." God City? Huaishir was stunned and thought that he heard wrong. The future of God City. Yes, God City. The lunatic, the future of God City. Qian Yilong laughed mockingly. It's very funny, isn't it? The former savior wants to tie the entire race to the war chariot. He came to us before, just like you. He thought that he could change everything and hoped that we could help him. But we didn't. We coldly watched him struggle, watched him fail miserably, and finally watched him leave alone. His assets were swallowed by his allies. His good intentions were betrayed by his supporters, and his hopes were trampled into the mud by the people he wanted to help. From the beginning to the end, we didn't stop him at all. It's because the inner circle of Danbo is such a cruel place. It's as if it's alive and will kill everything that doesn't belong to it. It will change everyone who wants to change, including the future of God City, Shangtianmu, me, and you. This isn't something that can be changed with one person's efforts, nor is it something that can be changed with the sacrifice of a group of people. As he spoke, Qian Yilong raised his hand and pointed at the glorious city outside the floor-to-ceiling window. Look, Huaishir. That's the capital tower, this is the central district, and that's the direction of the Qingshui board. Yujing, Zhuojing, Dongshan, Shanka, Shijing, look at how big and glorious the outside world is. If you look down from the sky, the so-called inner circle of Danbo, or Danbo district, is such a narrow place. Compared to this city, it's as small as a trash can. There's no distinction between nobility and lowliness. We're all ants that seek survival here. We're prisoners that are imprisoned here. We're just the kings of the infinite universe in this fruit pit. With his back facing the glorious lights, his smile became self-deprecating and strange. You want to obtain power from the Alliance and use it to change everything, but you're looking in the wrong direction. It's never the Alliance that rules the inner circle of Danbo. It's the inner circle of Danbo that rules the Alliance, and it won't accept the change that you want. In a long silence, Qian Yilong stared at the young man in front of him, but until the end, his resolute gaze never changed, no matter how shaken, shocked, or hesitant he was. "Thank you for your reminder and warning, Mr. Qianyi," Huaishir replied calmly. "Even so, I won't give up. That's why I say it's good to be young." Qianyi shook his head and waved his hand indifferently. "Huaishir, you can work hard. We won't stop you, but you'll fail. Everything you try will not succeed. Your efforts are meaningless. Now, you can leave." In the distance, the clock struck 12. Wild cheers rang out outside the private room, celebrating the birth of the new gambling king. Outside the window, beautiful fireworks rose into the sky, illuminating the young man's eyes. It was as if a fire had been lit in the abyss. "Mr. Qianyi, perhaps I'll fail in the end, but I don't think my efforts will be in vain." Even though he knew the final outcome, he was still smiling. "No matter how much I have to pay, even if only one person can be saved because of this, I believe that it'll be worth it." Just like that, he politely said goodbye and turned to leave. The door closed. In the silence, Qian Yilong did not speak anymore. He just stared at the light in the night sky in the distance quietly. He raised his head and drank the last of the wine. Chapter 754. On the way back, Huaishir sat in the car and watched the dazzling neon lights fade into the distance. He walked into the more familiar and dim streets. Under the smashed street lamps, homeless people in cardboard boxes poked their heads out of the alleys and looked around. Angry voices and scolding voices came from afar, as well as the cries of children. Amid the sound of metal scraping, the grocery store closed its doors. Soon, other than the hurried footsteps of pedestrians, there was only the sound of drunkards vomiting. It was not a happy or beautiful moment, but for some reason, Huaishir finally relaxed. It was as if he had returned to reality from a fleeting bubble and felt the familiar gravity. He closed his eyes and sighed silently. "Boss, you seem to be in a bad mood," Shangya, who was driving, suddenly said. Huaishir asked, "Why do you say that? Is my expression that obvious?" Shanya thought for a long time, then patted his head and shook his head. I don't know, it feels like Huaishir was speechless. Was this the sharp intuition of a single-celled organism? It was really admirable. He thought for a long time and finally could not help but ask, Shanya, if one day you don't have to do extreme Tao anymore, what do you want to do? Huh? Shanya did not understand at all. I mean, if you don't do extreme Tao anymore, what do you plan to do? Shanya widened his eyes in disbelief. Then I won't be able to live anymore, right? That can't be right. Boss, although it's a little embarrassing to say this, I don't even know how to use a calculator, Shanya said seriously. If I have a tattoo, the people in the convenience store won't want me. Besides, with such a bad temper, what if I hurt the customers? Huaishir could not help but want to roll his eyes. Okay, let's not talk about realistic conditions. I just want to know, if you have the chance to choose, is there anything you want to do? For example, dream or something. I haven't thought about it. That kind of thing is too complicated, right? Shanya thought for a long time and suddenly looked back. He widened his eyes and was full of curiosity. Boss, what about you? Huaishir didn't think that she would be counterattacked. After thinking for a moment, he couldn't help but shrug. To be honest, I used to want to be an artist. Well, the kind that plays music. But later, I felt that being a teacher wasn't bad either. Seeing my students grow up, I felt like I had grown up too. Before Huaishir could say anything, he frowned when he saw the look of realization on Shanya's face. If you dare to say I'm the same, I'll throw you out of here. Me too, cough, cough, cough. Shanya paused halfway through his sentence. After thinking for a long time, he asked tentatively, then it shouldn't be a problem for me to become a physical education teacher, right? Teach what? Huaishir sighed. Teach the children how to fight for territory with blades. You can't? Shanya widened his eyes in disbelief. Huaishir couldn't help but want to cover his face. What kind of misunderstanding do you have about school? Which normal school in the world would teach students such things? Ah, it feels very complicated. Shanya smiled awkwardly. If you can live happily without being an extreme, it's always a good thing, right? But I don't think there's a need to think so far ahead. Anyway, a rice ball only costs 30 yuan. At most, I'll work hard. As long as I'm alive, there's always a way. He thought for a moment and said confidently, my mother taught me, deal with today's matters today, and deal with tomorrow's matters tomorrow. What's the point of thinking so much? In the silence, Huaishir looked up at him in shock, as if he was meeting him for the first time. After a long time, he couldn't help but burst into laughter. He leaned forward and backward, overjoyed. Shanya looked at him from the rearview mirror with a blank expression. Did I say something wrong, boss? No, your mother is really a wise person, Shanya. Huaishir patted his shoulder and laughed happily. This is the most reasonable sentence I've heard tonight. Is that so? Of course, we're going for a drink tonight. Want to join us? Okay. I really want to drink. I want to eat sushi and sashimi, curry rice, fried pork chops, peony pot, ramen, tempura. I want to soak in hot springs, masa, and bubble baths under the gloomy moonlight. Tony held a bowl of instant noodles and sighed at the moon. The soft horse-face mask swayed in the wind, making the abstract face look even sadder. Why is it like this? It's rare for me to come to Yingzhou for a business trip. In the bleak wind, he sighed sadly. Is life only like this when I'm working overtime? Or is it always like this? No one responded. Only Horseface shook his head. He picked up the bowl of instant noodles, held the soft horse-face mask with one hand, and poured the soup and noodles into the hole in his big mouth. After a hollow sound like a kettle being poured, there was the sound of chewing. Finally, there was a burp. Dinner ended just like that. Perhaps there was also supper and tomorrow's breakfast. The Sad Astronomy Society animal put a lighter into the horse's mouth. After pressing it twice, 2 wisps of smoke came out of his nostrils. He looked up at the bottom of the rooftop. In the stillness of the night, the dusty storehouse was silent in the darkness. By the way, is the place where old colleagues meet so unostentatious? The level has dropped, bro, Tony muttered to himself. He took a step forward, stepped on the edge of the floor, and looked down at the drop below the rooftop. After confirming the height, he turned around, opened his arms, and suddenly jumped up. Just like that, he fell to the ground behind him. In midair, he nimbly flipped his body, swung his horse face, and spun in the wind. He flipped his body 2.5 times, then turned his body 2.5 times. Then, like a small spinning top, he spun 1,080 degrees in a rapid fall. After drawing an exaggerated arc, he finally smashed into the fragile ceiling of the warehouse. He fell from the sky. In the burst of loud noise, the uninvited guest broke into the light behind the ceiling and fell to the ground with a hurricane. However, not a trace of dust was raised. Yeah, full marks. Under the pale light, Tony slowly got up, stroked the horse's mane at the back of his head, held the gun with both hands, aimed at both sides, and looked around. "Hello, may I ask if Mr. Phoenix is home?" In the silence, no one responded. However, Tony did not relax his vigilance at all. He searched every place in the warehouse step by step. The warehouse, which should have been abandoned for many years, was full of all kinds of equipment that should not have appeared here at all. The densely packed surveillance screens showed the images of various key areas in the capital, but more of the scenes inside the Dombois inner circle. As the search program ran, the server soaked in a huge water tank continuously emitted high heat and a dull buzzing sound. The surrounding walls were hung with a dazzling array of weapons, including piles of boxes, alchemy explosives enough to blow up an entire stadium, and shoulder-mounted rocket launchers that should not have appeared in the city at all. The table in the deepest part was piled with countless complicated files, information, and records. On the wall, there was a huge map of the capital. It was densely packed with different marks. Tony approached step by step and casually picked up a piece of information. He saw the intelligence analysis about the Great White Fox. He picked up another one, which was the change of position in the looming hall. Then, there were the records of the external operations of the Imperial Army, as well as the information of the important figures of the shogunate under the general's command, and the monthly briefing of the Ingzhou governing authority branch to the public. And finally, under the countless information and records, there was a resume printed with the mark of top secret. Under the mark of the former Dark Army, the man in the horse mask in the photo looked at himself in a daze. It was at that moment that the cold barrel of the gun was pressed against the back of his head. A long-lost, frivolous voice sounded from behind him. "Did you miss me, Mr. Centaur?" In the darkness where the table lamp could not illuminate, the former ace assassin of the former Dark Army, Phoenix, greeted him. Tony's movement stopped in place, as if he was stiff. "A trap? Who knows?" Phoenix asked nonchalantly. "How long have you been looking for me?" "About half a month." "Well, since the sanatorium in Shambhala found out that you wanted to skip the bill." Tony reminded him warmly. "You can't stop taking the medicine, you Dongri. Don't worry, I stole a lot of money before I left. It's enough for me to eat until my birthday next year." Tony smiled. "Then what are you going to do after your birthday? Explode with a bang and become a pollution source?" "Thank you for your concern. I will find a good place with beautiful mountains and clear waters to dig a hole and bury myself in. When the time comes, please remember to give me flowers. I have to say, your colleagues and your family are very concerned about you." Tony sighed. "In order to avoid any unpleasant friction, can you please return to the picturesque sanatorium?" Don't worry, I have confidence in you. My colleagues are magnanimous. My family is reasonable, and this world is so beautiful. Even without me, everyone can live in harmony." Behind him, Yu Dongri whistled. "As long as the company is willing to give more compensation." "I don't think so." Tony advised again. "Come back with me, Yu Dongri. Many people are looking for you. The others may not be as reasonable as me." "Reason with a gun?" "It's because I want a reason that I only brought a gun." Tony reminded him. "It's fine if you ran away, but why did you rob the technical department's deep vault?" Now, the overhead floor of the Command Bureau, the Pollution Management Center of the Preservation Institute, and the legal office of the technical department are all looking for you. Some want you dead, some want you alive, and some want you half dead. It sounds like it's hard to persuade everyone. Who said it isn't? Tony shrugged helplessly. "So, do you want to consider my suggestion?" At that moment, There was a loud explosion, and the entire vault suddenly shook. White frost spread out from Tony's body, and with the eternal wind of frost, everything around him was frozen in huge and solid ice blocks, including Yu Dongri behind him. But when he looked back, he saw that the ice behind him was empty, and there was no trace of anyone. Only the light bulb above his head burst silently, and everything was swallowed in darkness. Then gunshots burst out. The melted alchemy bullets turned into blazing light in the barrel of the gun, crisscrossing in the empty darkness, leaving streaks of light that tore through the air. Sparks flew. As the figure stuck close to him, two daggers collided, and in a fleeting moment, two completely different faces were illuminated. One was the face of a horse with frost, and the other was an Ultraman mask that seemed to have been bought off the street. Ace. In the midst of the fierce struggle, Tony was amused. Your hobby is really unpopular. This is Zoffy. What do you know about the Giant of Light? Yu Dongri roared, eat my Ultraman flying kick. But in the darkness, not only was there no sound of flying kick, but there was also the blazing light of a bullet behind Tony. A sharp noise was heard as the burning bullet was deflected by the military knife. Tony angrily rebuked, "What kind of flying kick is this? You don't understand, do you? Everything can be kicked, including RPGs. Why can't a bullet be counted as a flying kick?" Yu Dongri pressed on step by step, as if he had already predicted all of Tony's moves. He perfectly dodged all of Tony's counterattacks, and with a dagger and a spell bullet in his pistol, he completely suppressed the Tier 3 Frost Giant. Tony retreated, dodging the dagger that was stabbing at the horse's face. He suddenly abandoned the knife, and the extreme cold and blizzard in his palm gushed out, turning into a sharp, long knife and slashing down. It missed. When he was about to remove the flash bomb behind him, he heard a crisp sound from where the flash bomb was. Then, a dazzling light exploded in front of his eyes. He didn't even have time to close his eyes. Then a punch. Through the horse's mask, it hit his face, causing him to stagger and retreat. But there was no way back behind him, and he had been forced into a corner. The dagger that was full of cracks penetrated his palm in an instant, nailing him to the wall. Then a pitch-black barrel was pressed against his forehead. "Don't move," Yu Dongri indifferently warned. "This time, I won't be merciful, Centaur." In the silence, Tony gasped in a low voice. Through the dim, flickering light on the server, he stared at the long-lost face in his eyes that seemed to be unfocused. Finally, it dawned on him. "Time axis misalignment?" He asked coldly. "How many times have you jumped, Yu Dongri?" As if he knew he was going to ask this, the face showed a mocking smile. "It has nothing to do with you, Tony. Why do you ask the same question every time? You should know the consequences of time jumps. Without the cooperation of the Bifrost mainframe, the time misalignment between the perception and the body will become more and more serious. Unstable time jumps would cause errors, tear the soul and consciousness, and cause time misalignment between the senses and the body." His body was active at this moment, but his consciousness had drifted uncontrollably to the future. This was not a good thing that brought about foresight. It was a precursor to collapse. It was better to say that after more than 17 jumps, Yu Dongri hadn't collapsed yet, which was really unexpected. Even if it was an illegal jump, it should have torn his soul and triggered self-destruction. It was a miracle that he could live until now. "How did you do it?" Tony asked in disbelief. "Of course, this is a secret." Yu Dongri finally smiled at him and pulled the trigger. Tony's vision turned black, and his body twitched involuntarily. He quickly lost all his strength. "Uh-huh, a tranquilizer bomb. Are you surprised?" Accompanied by a cheerful whistle, the smiling face retreated and disappeared into the darkness before his eyes. Chapter 755. When Tony opened his eyes again, his senses told him that less than 15 minutes had passed. Beside him, on the other side of the river, the originally huge warehouse was already enveloped in flames. It burned fiercely and lit up the night sky. The sharp sound of a fire engine could be heard in the distance. "Fu ake." Tony cursed subconsciously and got up from the ground. Then, he heard a familiar voice behind him. "You're so lucky." "Huh?" Tony turned around and saw AI Ching standing on the shore. She was holding her phone and quietly filming the burning scene in front of her. After a long time, she looked back and glanced at his wound. She understood and said, "Only your right hand is injured. You seem to have a good relationship with him. We've only been on a few missions together. I have nothing to do with that kind of monster." Tony's horse face twitched in annoyance. Then he reacted. Others were also attacked. Yes, according to the news from the other branches, he broke the legs of 2 investigators, and a detective was sent to the hospital because of a concussion. Other than that, there were 4 car accidents, 2 accidents. The most tragic one was dragged by the subway for 3 stations and almost lost his life. AI Ching shrugged. "Compared to that, I'm more surprised that you were able to escape unscathed after finding so many clues." Tony's horse face seemed to stiffen. Then, he scratched his horse's mane and laughed awkwardly. "I was in a hurry. I just found a clue and was about to catch a hot one. I forgot to report it." "No, you're lucky. If you reported it to me and a whole team came today, I'm afraid he wouldn't have shown mercy." AI Ching stared at the fire on the other side of the river and suddenly said, "He doesn't plan to hide anymore." "Huh?" Tony didn't understand. Just today, all the investigators who entered Damwa's inner circle were attacked. Although their injuries weren't serious, I'm afraid they won't be able to move in a short period of time. He doesn't want us to interfere in this matter. He's even preventing us from understanding the situation." AI Ching muttered and suddenly said, "The Astronomy Society is no longer trustworthy to him." "Huh? Why?" Tony didn't understand. "If he wants to stop the future of Divine City, we're on his side, right? Who knows? But you can take a guess." AI Ching pondered for a moment and laughed softly. "Perhaps it's because he concluded that once we know what happened in the Damwa inner circle, we will become his enemy." Tony was stunned. "Then what is he afraid of doing to us?" AI Ching whispered, "Stop him? No, that's not right. A person who can freely jump through time, regardless of the consequences, wants to do something. Unless an equivalent number of Doomsday Sentinels are dispatched, no one can stop him." Under the illumination of the fire, she suddenly revealed a mocking smile. "Then what will we do?" "Unless things get really bad, the Astronomical Society can't do anything. So that's how it is. In other words, it will cause the Astronomical Society to disregard the country's sovereignty and act ruthlessly." "What?" Tony was dumbfounded. He couldn't understand why AI Ching's thoughts were so jumpy. "Why don't you think in another direction? What problem can't be solved even after jumping through time 17 times? No, 18 times. AI Ching said to herself. "The most likely result is that Green Sun wants to tear up the tacit agreement and contract with the Astronomical Society. Taking advantage of the opening of the War of Worlds, it will trigger a conflict between the present realm and the border through hybridization, and then complete the full-scale war that couldn't be started more than a decade ago. Perron wants to use this to continue the final ritual and push the present realm to the brink of collapse. Through this war, he will become a complete natural enemy. But this is the most unlikely, because if Perron doesn't care about the stability of the present realm, then he wouldn't have needed to compromise with the Astronomical Society more than a decade ago. Green Sun is a rebel organization, but it's not a destructive element. Then, there's only one possibility left. In the near future, even without Green Sun, the Damwa Inner Circle will become a threat to the present realm. But what can a group of pitiful creatures living between the cracks of the Gong and Wu families do? The most likely scenario was that God City had completed the law of single-stranded negative-strand RNA virus in the future. Perhaps it had already been completed long ago, before everyone, including Miyamoto Genichiro, had discovered it. The irreversible consequences of the time jump had already been planted. Or even in the dead silence, AI Ching slowly raised her head and looked indifferently into the distance. "Do you need me to continue speculating, you Dongri? How long are you going to hide behind that pair of binoculars? What are you hiding?" No one responded. Only a red laser spot appeared on her forehead, exposed from her long hair flying in the wind. It was a murderous intent that couldn't be hidden even by the dancing flames. Tony suddenly stood up and searched his body. Finally, he pinched a small black spot under his trousers. It was a bug. Are you angry? AI Ching lowered her head and lit the cigarette at the corner of her mouth. She smiled mockingly. You've always been a coward, you Dongri. Even if you have the power, you're afraid of hurting others and never do anything. You always look like you're smiling, but in fact, you're always indifferent. You never trust others. Have you ever thought that it's because of your self-righteous and weak appearance that you're suffering today? Even your girlfriend has become your ex. Don't you plan to reflect on yourself? Miss A.I. Ching, who also holds the role of an ex. Did you go to London to attend a course to learn how to use a poisonous tongue? A noisy voice came from the small bug. After all, we're colleagues. I've been your tool for so long in Exine High. Even if I didn't do anything, I've worked hard. Why do you have to provoke me? Are you referring to the incident where you pretended to be my subordinate during the day and then secretly went in and out of Sorcery City at night? A.I. Ching flicked the ash from a cigarette. Why don't you be honest with me and tell me what you took away from Sorcery City? A blurry and frivolous laughter came. As a tool, there are times when you can't do what you want. It's just a little scandal in the past. Why do you have a harp on it? As a man, I have to remind you, a woman who's always too serious is not likable. A.I. Ching's eyes became colder. Do I have to be a fool like Ji Kwang? If you want to fight, I'm not sleepy anymore. Through the static of the bug, Yu Dongri seemed to laugh. Why are we sisters so stiff? Tranquilizer bullets won't work, Yu Dongri. As if she could see that the trigger was about to be pulled, A.I. Ching reminded him coldly. I always carry a recording pen with me. It's turned on 24 hours a day, and all the records will be transferred to my email in real time. If I don't authenticate myself every 12 hours, the email will be sent out. If you want me to shut up, you'd better come up with some other excuse, okay? There's something wrong with you. Yu Dongri sighed helplessly. What kind of person would develop this kind of habit? As long as you have a good friend, all good habits can be developed. A.I. Ching tilted her head and smoked the cigarette. She stared at the fire on the other side of the river and laughed coldly. Now, give me a reason to remain silent. After a short silence, the person on the other side was silent for a long time. Then, his tone became full of expectation and trust. Can you help me? No, F***CK off. A.I. Ching replied. Why don't you put the barrel in your mouth and pull the trigger? Then you'll see your beautiful wish come true. Yu Dongri sighed. What if it's not just helping me? In the long silence, A.I. Ching lowered her head and smoked. After a long time, she put out the cigarette in her hand. Yu Dongri, I can finally be sure that you did it on purpose. When she raised her head, her eyes became calm. There was no anger or hatred in them. She only said softly, once this matter is over, no matter how much value you have left to the Astronomy Society, no matter whether your adoptive father is Perron or Tyr, no matter whether you're hiding in the lunar fortress or in the trench prison, don't worry, I will personally pour your brains down the toilet. Wow, why is this treatment even worse than last time? Yu Dongri was stunned. I have to say, I really didn't bang. The sudden explosion caused Tony, who had been listening intently, to almost jump in fright. A burst of anger condensed into a crystallized origin substance that exploded in his hand, turning the listening device into dust. In the silence, Tony stared at A.I. Ching in a daze. A.I. Ching was also staring at him. Is this, cough cough, a bad idea? He asked awkwardly. A.I. Ching looked at him in confusion. Are you talking about how you went around me and tried to negotiate with Yu Dongri? Or are you saying that you think I made some kind of shady deal with him? Cough, cough. What? Sorry, I'm deaf. I didn't hear anything just now. The after effects of this anesthesia are really bad. Tony patted his head and looked around. Then he clutched his hand and yelled exaggeratedly. I'm injured. My blood is all over the ground. For the next few days, I can only eat sashimi, sushi, hot springs, and a piece of trash. What am I going to do? I'm so pitiful. A.I. Ching retracted her gaze. She stared coldly at the darkness in the distance that the light from the fire couldn't illuminate, then turned around and left. 6 kilometers away, on the rooftop of a tall building, there was no heavy sniper rifle. Yu Dongri held up his binoculars and stared at the figure gradually disappearing into the distance. He raised his hand and turned off the laser rangefinder on the shelf next to him. What the hell? The more we move, the more we reveal. Which one of us is the one with the cheat code? Yu Dongri tilted his head and lit a cigarette. He took a deep breath and couldn't help but sigh. In this world, it's getting harder and harder to fool women. A choking cough suddenly sounded. Dark blood overflowed from the corner of his mouth, causing the cigarette to quickly rot and turn into cotton wool. Yu Dongri hurriedly pulled out a bag and caught all the blood that he spat out. After carefully putting it away, he wiped his mouth. Damn it, I can't even smoke. This is ridiculous, he cursed in a low voice. He pulled out a medicine bottle from his pocket and stuffed a metallic pill into his mouth. Then he screwed the cap back on. Inside the medicine bottle, the sound of the pills colliding with each other burst forth. Yu Dongri picked it up and shook it. Then he shook it again. Due to the dizziness and suffocation that emerged from the medicine, he closed his eyes. There were still 8 pills left. The next day, there was a constant knock on the door. Huaishir opened his eyes from his hangover and subconsciously picked up his phone. The news pop-up window appeared. In the news of a warehouse fire somewhere in Dambua Inner Circle, he saw the time. Only 5 o'clock? Who the hell is coming so early? When he opened the door, he saw old man Sheng Tianmu standing outside the door. He raised his head and looked at Huaishir's sleepy face. Yo, Huaishiki-kun, you look energetic. Are you interested in accompanying me for a visit? Visit? Huaishir was confused. Where are we going to visit? Bakufu. Sheng Tianmu said, to see the general. Chapter 756. What the hell? Huaishir suspected that he was deaf. After picking his ears for a long time, he asked seriously, General? Yes. Sheng Tianmu nodded. Huaishir found it hard to believe. He asked again, that American? Yes. Sheng Tianmu nodded and pointed to his car. Let's go first. We'll talk about the rest of the way. The chauffeur handed the car keys to Huaishir as soon as he got out of the car. Huaishir slipped the keys into her trouser pocket. Sheng Tianmu's footsteps paused, and his eyelids twitched wildly. I told you to drive, not put the car away. I just gave you a Bentley last time, and you're already interested in my new car? I'm not used to it. Are you used to it? Huaishir smiled awkwardly and took out the car keys again. Sheng Tianmu stood in front of the car door. After waiting for a long time, Huaishir did not open the door for him. Not only did he not open the door, but he also stood behind and looked at him in a daze. Hey, why don't you get in the car? Huai Jun. Sheng Tianmu sighed. Recalling this idiot's attitude of, I turn the table when the leader picks food for me, and I break when the leader drinks water, Sheng Tianmu sighed. It's Ingzhou's blessing that you didn't become a civil servant. Ignoring his blank look, Sheng Tianmu shook his head and opened the car door and sat in. He had not opened the door for himself for so many years. It was quite novel. Speaking of which, where are we going? Huaishir tapped on his phone for a long time and found that the address could not be found. I can't even find the GPS. It would be strange if the GPS could find it. Sheng Tianmu said, You can leave the capital from the south first. I'll tell you how to drive on the way. I won't go the wrong way, right? There's only one way, Huaishir. There's no other choice. Sheng Tianmu closed his eyes and sighed helplessly. As long as I can get through, I won't go the wrong way. It was just like what Sheng Tianmu said. After leaving the city, Huaishir realized that Sheng Tianmu was right. After leaving the city for a while, there was only one road left in front of him. There were no cars on the road. Only Huaishir's car was moving forward alone. There were no checkpoints, nor were there any inspections, but he felt like he was being watched by countless eyes. On both sides of the road, Huaishir had carefully constructed all kinds of gardens and landscapes that Huaishir could not imagine. It was as if they had already entered the garden in front of the general's court. In the early morning, the gardeners began to work hard, pruning the flowers and branches, respectfully offering their lifetime skills to maintain the most perfect appearance of the work, not daring to have a single flaw. Even if the general couldn't be bothered to look at it, Huaishir felt an inexplicable pressure pressing down on him, making him involuntarily nervous. He straightened his body and drove in front. Finally, he asked, "Why do you want to see the general?" Sheng Tianmu still did not open his eyes. He only asked, "At this time, other than the general, is there anyone else who is willing to look at us?" Huaishir's hand holding the steering wheel stiffened. Finally, he felt the pressure he had been facing these days behind Sheng Tianmu's tired face. The existence of the command of peace was like a heavy burden. For the inner circle of Donbua, it was undoubtedly a sudden disaster. The consumption tax reform was pending in the struggle between the political parties, and there were constant storms. It sounded like a simple change in the tax point, but in fact the impact behind it affected the entire Yingzhou and even Southeast Asia. Behind this was the conflict and friction between the new capital controlled by the Wu family and the old tycoons behind the Gong family. Once the peace order was officially issued, the existence of the Donbua inner circle would be like weeds floating in the dark and in the endless battles between the various parties. It would be extremely fragile, internal and external troubles. It was also under this huge pressure that the alliance allowed the existence of the Huaishir group to soar like a rocket. They united all forces to protect themselves. They did not ask to win the final victory, but only hoped to survive after the storm. The gangs of Dongxia could close their doors and get out of the matter. But the mixed race had no choice. If they did not seek protection, they would only end up at the mercy of others. Even if they died, their corpses would be used as scapegoats and the source of all evil to bear the sins. If there is anyone who can help us at this time, it is only His Excellency, Sheng Tianmu said in a low voice. For a long time, the inner circle of Donbua has been able to exist because of the acquiescence of that lord. I only hope that the general can be merciful. Will he care? Huaishir did not understand. Who knows? We'll have to see if they're interested in what we have. Sheng Tianmu rubbed his old face and sighed silently. For this meeting, I used up all the accumulated favors and brought all the treasures collected by the alliance. If we fail, we will have no other choice. Huaishir asked, "What do you need me to do?" "You don't need to do anything. You can't represent the alliance. Your role today is only as a driver. Don't speak. Don't make any unnecessary movements. Don't care about the humiliation of others, if they will still look at us." Sheng Tianmu said, "You just need to avoid any accidents and ensure that I can live to see the general." Along the way, Sheng Tianmu seemed to be resting with his eyes closed, but in reality, his body under the robes was always tense, alert, and on guard. Huaishir always felt that he was overly sensitive, but he could understand the feeling of not wanting any accidents to happen when there was a glimmer of hope in front of him. The wind was calm and the waves were calm. There were no attacks, no accidents. Under Huaishir's escort, they had already arrived outside the general's residence before 7 in the morning. There was already a receptionist waiting at the door and then brought them into the lounge to serve them tea and snacks. His Excellency the General thought too much last night and only went to bed a few hours ago. The time of meeting with you may be slightly delayed. I ask that Your Excellency Sheng Tianmu be patient and wait patiently. After saying this, the receptionist respectfully left and closed the door for them. As time passed, hurried footsteps could be heard outside the door, but no one pushed open the door and entered. Instead, they coldly passed through the door and walked in another direction. At first, Sheng Tianmu would prop up his body and put on a respectful expression every time. However, towards the end, his expression gradually dimmed. Huaishir once suspected that this was some kind of trick to accidentally enter the White Tiger Festival Hall, but after cautiously looking around and using the excuse of going to the toilet 4 or 5 times, he found that this was just an ordinary lounge. The entire residence was bustling with activity. The attendants ran about in an orderly manner, carrying out the daily cleaning and labor. Sometimes, There were stern-looking warriors and respectful officials coming in and out. Apart from his servants who occasionally poured tea and water, it seemed that no one cared about these two specks of dust that didn't belong here. If not for Shang Tianmu's words, Huaisha couldn't help but urge him, even if it was useless. Helpless, he could only wait patiently. This wait lasted for an entire day. At noon, the dock area in the Dongbua Inner Circle was bustling. This was perhaps the place where the Dongbua Inner Circle interacted with other areas the most frequently. One of the 5 ports in Kyoto was located in this place. Although it was limited by the construction of the berths and couldn't dock large ships, because of the geographical location and the fishing season, it attracted a large number of fishing boats to dock. Especially in the summer and autumn every year, it was the busiest time. The fishing boats that had just returned to the port were busy unloading their goods, and the wholesalers from various fresh markets were already ready. Trucks rolled in and out of the sea water and fish scales on the ground, and in the pungent, fishy smell, many buyers from restaurants were also waiting for the goods from familiar merchants. With the fishy smell of the sea all over his body, fisherman Takahashi, who had been on the ground for less than an hour, wiped the sweat off his forehead. His hands clumsily completed the calculation of the accounts. After confirming that there was no one around, he shouted loudly in the noisy market, "Sakamoto! Sakamoto! Where the hell did you go? Come and move the goods." On the fishing boat behind him, there was a clear response, but it wasn't the hoarse response of a middle-aged man, but the loud voice of a young girl. "Coming, please wait for a moment." The boxes that were piled up to a height of 4 or 5 meters seemed to have grown legs, staggering down from the boat. The dull sound of water echoed inside, and the buyer next to Takahashi changed his expression, and he couldn't help but take a step back. That was a tank filled with seawater and seafood. If it fell, he might not be able to keep his life. What was even more exaggerated was that this huge living thing that needed to be moved by a forklift actually came to him step by step with the support of a pair of hands. Finally, with a bang, it was placed on the ground. From behind, a young and pretty face with a delicate ghost horn squeezed out smiled at Takahashi embarrassedly. "Mr. Sakamoto said he went to the toilet and asked me to help him." The buyer sucked in a breath of cold air and doubted his eyes. Was this really a human? Takahashi's expression, which was rarely sunny, became gloomier. "Toilet? I think he went to visit a prostitute. I hope I don't get fooled by that guy again." "It's okay. I'm strong anyway." The girl called Shinki chuckled. Takahashi retracted his gaze and looked at the buyer. "I'm sorry for making a fool of myself, Mr. Aksushima. The things we order are all here. Please check them." "It's okay. We trust the people recommended by Ms. Jiang." The young man with dyed blonde hair smiled politely. After paying the bill, he said a few polite words and immediately turned back to instruct the porters to load the cart. From the beginning to the end, Shinki watched curiously from the side. These strange people seemed to have more or less tattoos on their bodies, and they didn't smile, but they were straightforward, and they didn't even haggle. They didn't even need to record the monthly payment, but paid on the spot. Many fishermen had turned down orders from other places and gave priority to the goods to them, and took the initiative to give a generous discount. Is it going to be a big shopping mall nearby? Shinki blinked and looked forward to it. Next time we can go shopping. They're all hypocrites. Behind her, the young man who was scraping fish on the side of the boat snorted coldly and cursed in a low voice. I don't know what those guys from the paper group are doing. He had a huge birthmark on his face, and his keratinized skin curled up like scales. When he talked about that word, his expression was full of disgust. Shinki was stunned for a moment, and then again she looked back, thinking that she had misheard and didn't react. "Toshio, you just said the paper group?" "Huh. Sister Shinki, don't you know?" Toshio spat into the sea and said disdainfully, "It's the new leader of the villains in the city, the paper group." In order to do business for himself, he monopolized all the water and vegetable supply in the inner circle of Dongbua. He wants to eat all of it alone. Shinki was confused. Paper group. Group? Yeah, the name is strange, right? Toshio snorted. "I heard that he's also a pervert. Last time I saw him taking off his clothes on the street, shameless. Shinki felt that her brain couldn't process and felt that something was wrong, that he's not necessarily a bad person, right? Toshio paused for a moment, and his eyes drooped, unable to hide his hatred. Brother Ryu was killed by him. Annie Uchiyama was such a good person, but now she's crying every day. He even pretended to ask people to give him money, as if he wants his stinky money. Toshio paused for a moment, and his hand holding the knife was so tight that it turned white. He lowered his head and squeezed out a hoarse voice from between his teeth. Sooner or later, I'll kill him. In the low sound of footsteps, a burly shadow appeared behind him. He froze for a moment, then turned around and saw Takahashi's cold expression. Brat, I'm warning you for the last time. I don't care about your business. Once you get off the boat, you can go wherever you want. But if you talk like a hooligan on my boat again, I will kick you off the boat. Do you understand? Toshio paused for a moment, then reluctantly nodded and continued scraping fish. After a long time, Takahashi turned around and left. For lunch, they had seafood rice with unlimited caviar and salmon. This was one of the benefits of working on a fishing boat, so Shinki ate more than half of the pot. After lunch, Takahashi called Shinki into the cabin, then opened the safe inside, took out a thin stack of banknotes, and handed it to her. 400,000, this is your salary. Yeah, thank you, Mr. Takahashi. Shinki raised the banknotes in her hand as if she had received a treasure and excitedly waved her hands. This can pay off a lot of the debt. When will we set off again? At least 4 or 5 days later. Takahashi shook his head, glanced at Shinki, and hesitated. Huh? What's wrong? Shinki didn't understand. Keep an eye out, Takahashi said in a muffled voice. I don't know why you need money so urgently, but when you get ashore, be careful of those people who say sweet words. The inner circle of Damboa is not like other places, and people are sinister. He didn't know how such a stupid mixed-race girl grew up. A week ago, she came looking for a job. If she wasn't strong enough to do the work of 4 or 5 people and only wanted an ordinary salary, Takahashi didn't intend to hire her. He had been prepared for her to cry after a few days of work, but he didn't expect that she had done so much work in a week, and she didn't even complain about being tired. She was too stupid. If it weren't for Takahashi's strict watch, she would have been cheated out of her money by those lazy people on the boat. Huh? Shinki was puzzled. I feel that everyone is quite good, and they don't smell like bad people. Are you a dog? Takahashi rolled his eyes, pointed to the cabin door, and told her to leave quickly. He was too lazy to pay attention to her. But before she left, he stopped her with a serious look. Don't spread Toshio's words outside. That's just a silly boy who doesn't know the immensity of heaven and earth. Do you understand? Shinki nodded blankly, as if she didn't understand. Her silly look made Takahashi even more annoyed. She was so brainless. Don't be deceived to go somewhere as soon as you get ashore, thinking of the consequences. Hey, Shinki. He got up and chased after her, asking, have you found a place to work? Huh? Shinki turned back. Takahashi hesitated for a moment and finally sighed. Didn't you say that you used to help in the kitchen? I know a restaurant I know, and it's hiring recently. Hey, oh, okay. Shinki's eyes widened in excitement, and she rushed over and held his calloused hands. Please be sure to introduce it to me. There was a crisp sound. Takahashi's face turned green. Shinki, huh? Mr. Takahashi, why are you crying? Let go of my hand. My wrist is dislocated. Oh, fortunately, it's okay, Mr. Takahashi. I'm sorry. Holding the address and business card given to her by Takahashi, Shinki, who got off the boat, still looked back in the direction of the port uneasily and sighed in distress. I seem to have screwed up again. Sister Shinki, you should be careful. Next to her, Toshio snorted. That kind of middle-aged single old man may have bad intentions. You're so beautiful. What if one day he's lustful and does something to you? Okay, don't say that. Uncle Takahashi has his own difficulties. Shinki smiled and rubbed his hair. Where are you going next? I don't know. Toshio's face was lonely. After my brother left, Annie Uchiyama has been very sad these 2 days. I don't want to disturb her. That's why she needs someone to comfort her. What are you thinking about? Family is very important. Shinki squeezed his head hard until Toshio cried out in pain. Okay, don't waste money. Buy a gift for Annie Uchiyama. She must miss you very much. Okay, what's wrong? Don't be sad. Shinki thought for a moment and suggested, how about I treat you to ramen? There's no limit. Tisk, it's not a manga. Who would like that except for Uncle? Hey, ramen is very good. It's cheap, high in calories, and it's very filling. Sometimes it's even free. Shinki said. Junshi said, in short, when you grow up, you must eat more. Let's go. Shinki dragged Toshio to eat ramen, and then supervised him to buy a gift for Annie Uchiyama. Shinki was still worried, so she resolutely walked Toshio to the place. It's already so late. I don't need you to walk me. The closer they got to the place, the more Toshio resisted. He didn't dare to enter the door. On the other hand, Shinichi rolled up her sleeves and punched the wall beside her. I'm very strong. Don't worry. With a bang, a big hole appeared in the wall. Even Toshio, who knew of her monstrous strength, widened his eyes in shock. The people who had poked their heads out of the dark alleys with ill intentions swallowed their saliva, and then locked themselves back into the shadows. Okay, let's go. Annie Uchiyama must be waiting for you. She patted Toshio and pushed him in front of the dilapidated door. Toshio took a deep breath, summoned his courage, and knocked on the door. No one answered. He knocked again, and still no one answered. In the silence, the two looked at each other and had a bad feeling. But soon, the door opened. Instead of the gloomy clouds and desolation that they had expected, the family was filled with a warm and harmonious atmosphere. An old man with a walking stick walked a smiling, middle-aged woman to the door. When he saw the two of them, he couldn't believe his eyes. Toshio, you're finally back? The old man hugged the child in front of him in surprise. You brought your friends. Come in, come in. This is Toshio. The middle-aged woman smiled. Just like Annie Uchiyama said, he's young and cute. Auntie, who is she? Toshio looked at the woman warily. How rude. The old man patted his head. Don't be rude. It's been Miss Sonoda who's been comforting me and helping me these past few days. No. We're both members of the fraternity. I'm just doing my job. Auntie Uchiyama smiled and waved her hand. I'll be leaving first. If you two have time, you can come to the fraternity and participate in activities. We can only overcome difficulties together if we help each other. After a few more pleasantries, she turned and left. Junshi stood there in confusion, looking in the direction she left. That big sister had a strange smell on her. You're tuning into the Warrior Lore YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.